Somewhere beyond the recesses of time and space, two podcasters are set adrift in a machine, picking up transmissions of movies that are forgotten but not gone.
Welcome, everyone, to Movie Memory Machine, the only podcast about forgotten movies that freaks out. I am your host, Landen Solano, joined always by my co-host, Truman Caps. Truman, it's good to see you.
Landen, it's good to be seen. I think that there's lots of podcasts about movies where guys are freaking out. I mean, we were recording this on the day that the trailer for the sequel to the Joker movie dropped. So I just think that the demographic of guys making podcasts about movies, there's a lot of freaking out going on right now.
And by the time this episode airs, the Joker movie might be in theaters.
Yes,
we are recording early.
I'm freaking out thinking about that. Do you think? Because, hey, listen, The Joker, also a great movie about the late 70s urban tableau. Do you think the Joker would have gone to 54? Do you think that would have been too twisted even for him?
I don't think he would have been able to get in. We didn't really talk about the discerning nature that Rubell or Steve Rubell has for who he lets into his. I mean, listen, the Steve Rubell in this movie is basically Mike Myers as Steve Rubell. I don't feel too guilty calling him Mike Rubell.
Mike Rubell, though, at that point, then it could just be like a mattress salesman or something. I like to think that Steve Rubell would let the Joker into the club, at least the Joaquin Phoenix Joker, simply because he lets a super old lady in there. Like, it seems like you don't just have to be sexy. If you're like weird enough and owning it, then you can get in. And
let's get right into it with this stuff.
You don't want to talk about the Joker anymore. Wow. Well, typical,
no.
Dude.
It's part of the conversation, but I want to remind folks, this week we are diving right back into 54 with the director's cut that is... spoiler alert, shockingly different in my view.
Yes.
For how similar it is, how shocking the end result can be different.
I mean, okay, spoiler alert, it is still about Studio 54. It's still set in the set. Like, it's not like the director's cut is like out of Africa or something like that, but it's the similarities are almost more shocking than the differences, simply in that, like, so much is still there, but it creates such a different end effect, if that makes sense.
Well, this is what this episode's going to be about, and we have a very special guest today, Louis Jordan, who wrote basically the article on the director's cut when it was released in 2014 or 15. So that's what the bulk of today's episode is going to be about. But I don't want to gloss over the question about whether or not the Joker will be let in or let out of Studio 54.
Yes.
I hate club culture. Would I have gone to Studio 54? I don't think so.
No, not our vibe.
It's not. I mean, yeah, which is not to criticize. It's just like I'm more pointing the finger at me of like, I'm not that type. Because I had a incident when I lived in Los Angeles. You know what? Fuck it. I don't give a shit. I'm going to call him out. The Edison, downtown Los Angeles.
Boo. Fuck you.
I had just bought $200 shoes because I knew that there was going to be this huge party there. Truman, you probably know this story.
Yes, I do. It's part of your origin story. This is
my Joker story.
This is your Joker. I mean, yeah, this is it. Joaquin Phoenix is going to play you in the film adaptation of the story you're about to hear.
So I was like, granted, listen, I've never been super stylish. I did buy these shoes specifically for this event. I was very excited. And I get to the door and they wouldn't let me in. And I was as dressed as physically possible for Landen Solano. And
you're wearing a heavy coat and a hat, snow pants, 3 pairs of mittens.
Or what was the one that Tony Shalhoub asked for?
Gore-Tex boots, yes.
Gore-Tex,
the finest
boots,
of all boots. My mom watching that saying like, oh, those are the proper boots for that climate.
So standing outside there for a birthday party that I was invited to, and they wouldn't let me in because these new shoes I had laces. And they're like, fuck no, get out of here with your fucking laces, dude. And I'm like, are you? I had to fight. If you haven't lived in Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or
Congratulations.
Atlanta or a big city, the fight to get somewhere that you don't want to go to in the first place is a real struggle. To go from the west side of Los Angeles to downtown for an event that is going to be socially stressful in the first place is not ideal for anyone. But
you got that pre-stress already. Yeah.
So we spent 45 minutes just trying to get to the place, find parking, walk up, and the dude's like, yeah, this thing that you're invited to, you can't go to. You're going to disappoint everyone because you have laces.
Yeah.
While he's telling me this, while he's like, he's got, in my memory, I don't know if it's true, but in my memory, he's got like one finger up to his ear, like listening into an earpiece with one other hand, like outstretched, like, no, hold on, I gotta check with the boss. Nope, you're right. No, the laces policy has not changed. You need to stay out here, sir. While he's doing this to me, someone in like, when you think of green screens on films.
Yeah.
Like and it's Always Sunny.
Green Man.
The Green Man, the bodysuit.
Bodysuit. Yeah.
Someone wearing that, but as a tutu with dildos stringed off of them, walks out of the Edison, wearing shoes that don't have laces, and he was able to get in. And I'm like, whatever is transpiring here, I'm not for it, and I refuse to ever go into the Edison in Los Angeles ever again or endorse it in any way, shape, or
form. And he's dancing on the stairs. That was it. And Los Angeles was never the same. The new clown prince of nightclubs had descended upon us. Yeah, I mean, okay, I guess I could see, but the thing is, I feel like Steve Rubell would come up with a no shoelaces policy just as a goof to fuck with people. Yeah. So maybe what we're actually, maybe truly Steve Rubell is the Joker of Studio 54. I'm also...
Well, the thing is, I mean, like, Dildo Guy would have gotten into Studio 54, and I get that. That makes sense. That seems like it fits.
Famous Batman villain Dildo Guy.
But getting into just some swanky downtown Los Angeles, establishment was bullshit to me. But I wanted to tell that story to illustrate and maybe segue us into talking about the discernment over who gets into Studio 54 and who doesn't.
Sure.
Because we see it a couple times throughout the film, and I tipping my hand here. I think it's going to play into our trailer game later.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it will. I think that also it's kind of a good metaphor because much as Steve Rubell was there guarding the velvet rope for what kind of people could get into Studio 54, Miramax was kind of the bouncer guarding the velvet rope of what kind of scenes and content get into the theatrical cut of 54. And what we watched today, the 54 director's cut, is like, what if there was a nightclub with no bouncer and there were no rules? Well, wait, no, that's not, because what actually comes out of it is a pretty good movie. But you get the point. There's nobody gatekeeping this film except for the person who wrote and directed the movie.
I might need you to gatekeep me here. I
edit the podcast. I'm already doing that.
Fair point, but let's get into. How do you've opened too many doors and I don't know which one to walk through right now.
I mean, the Joker would also do that.
Let's do the Miramax thing in a second. I think we need some more context about the film before we get into that conversation. But let's just talking about Studio 54, talking about celebrity culture. This cut, I think, does a much better job of painting what Studio 54 felt like.
Yes. Yes.
To get in, to be in.
Yes.
The groupings, the niches that occur within it. In this cut, Truman Capote is almost a supporting character.
I mean, naturally, I approve. More representation of eccentric people named Truman is always an improvement for a film.
What are your general thoughts about that and how it's depicted here? Do you think like they did a good job of really capturing the vibe of the gatekeepers of who can get into Studio 54?
I mean, yes. I feel like I just got a better sense of Studio 54 in general, just like spatially as a place and as a both in space and in time, like what a night at 54 is like, and what it is like walking around the club, because a lot of footage of the club, of the process of getting into the club and everything, before it was chopped up, thrown into montages with a disco song in the background and Ryan Phillippe explaining the things happening on screen. Now these things are extended, allowed to breathe as they were written, and so you can kind of just, you're not unmoored in time, and it's like, wait, were the 4 scenes that I saw multiple nights or the same night? Here it's just, you're kind of following him into the club, around the dance floor. You're following the different people he meets. You kind of know where Truman Capote is at all times, which again is, it's always good to have a mental picture of that.
The first and last act of this movie are the two most different things.
Yeah.
Though the first act is really just, as you said, letting things breathe a little bit more. And the difference it makes for the rest of the film is kind of astonishing to me.
Yes.
But before we do that, let's just go through some specs, and then let's really just dig into this conversation. So,
absolutely,
if you had to differentiate the synopsis from last week to this week, how does the new stuff change the story for you?
All right, I'm gonna try and take a crack at this on the fly. So,
okay.
If you listen to last week's episode, the next couple sentences are going to sound pretty familiar. It's 1979, and 19-year-old gas station attendant Shane O'Shea, played by Ryan Phillippe, is determined to break out of his humdrum suburban life in New Jersey to experience the glitz and glamour of New York City's hottest and most expensive nightclub, Studio 54. Standing in the crowd outside the club, Shane catches the eye of 54's eccentric and mercurial owner, Steve Rubell, played by Mike Myers, who grants him entry and gives him a job as a shirtless bartender. Okay, that you all knew. At this point, once he's in the club, Shane finds himself really drawn to the kind of freewheeling and liberating atmosphere of the dance floor. Shane is entranced by seeing the different types of people who are at the bar, seeing men kissing men, men kissing women, kissing men, all kinds of just different lifestyles than he was aware of previously. Shane still forms a friendship with the other bartender, Greg, played by Breckin Meyer, and Greg's wife, Anita, played by Salma Hayek, and still moves in with them, as in the other version of the movie. As Shane spends more time working at the club, he gets in with more closely with the group of friends surrounding the record company executive, Billy, and there is an extended sequence where we see that in addition to sleeping with a lot of women while he's working at the club, he is also sleeping with a lot of wealthy older gay men. And in this version of the movie, his relationship with Greg, the fellow bartender, is a lot closer. They spend a lot of time together. They actually talk some about how Greg chooses not to sleep with men to get ahead, but Shane has made that decision. He wants to do that. There is more of a relationship between Shane and Anita, Greg's wife, played by Salma Hayek, in which they actually pursue something, which then is kind of blown apart. And also the character played by Neve Campbell really does not factor that much into this movie, which is a huge improvement. I don't know, that might be pretty choppy and disjointed, but I promise you it's less choppy and disjointed than the theatrical cut of this film.
Yes, yeah. There's only one point that I would take up with your synopsis, which is that while, yes, he does sleep with older men, and clientele might be a better term for it, he is also experimenting with other men of his age, boys of his age. There are a handful of scenes in the montage that I said was, or series of shots, where we see Ryan Phillippe's.
Yeah, right, cool.
Which we see a lot more of in this version.
There's so much more of Ryan Phillippe's in this movie.
There in the theatrical cut, we see one woman in one shot, and then it moves to an overhead, and it's another woman, and then in another shot, when he gets up and we see his Phillippe's, it's another woman. In this one, it goes woman, boy, woman.
Yeah.
Boy,
man,
teenage guy, his age, period,
young man,
whatever.
Yeah.
Young man is a good term for it.
Yeah, there's a place you can go.
Why I think it's important to just highlight that more than just to correct you is that I think that it subtly hints at the story of him finding himself and being open to things, which illuminates to me the biggest moment in this version that was cut out of the theatrical, which is the moment between him and Breckin Meyer,
where he kisses Breckin Meyer in Greg. He kisses Breckin Meyer, Greg, in the basement of 54, and
there's a
Breckin
big smoochy scene.
Yeah, but Breckin Meyer rebuffs him and says, "Hey, no, thank you," and that then leads into a bunch of third act New Year's Eve drama.
Yeah, which is so much more compelling, but because it plays on a character level rather than a narrative level, that the narrative wasn't written for in the first place, i.e. the theatrical cut.
Yes, and that's kind of one of the major things that I found looking back at this version of the movie. The theatrical cut is really a movie about, holy shit, there was this awesome nightclub called Studio 54, and here's some stuff that happened there. And this is a movie about, this is a story about a young man who goes to a place to find himself, and in the process of finding himself and discovering who he really is, he learns about how he values himself and how he wants to be seen and his value as a person, and the backdrop for this is Studio 54. Like the theatrical cut tries to take a story of kind of personal self-discovery and turn it into a historical kind of a movie about Studio 54, and this is really not a movie. Yeah, and sucks badly. It's like a bad movie about Studio 54, and this movie is true to what the actual intention is.
And I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, where the movie, I think because it's called 54. And I don't know if you've watched any of the like interviews or supplemental material or read anything, but and I think Lewis mentions this in his article about 54. Yeah, is that the filmmakers have taken to calling the theatrical cut 55.
Why do they call it 55?
Because it's not the 54 that they set out to create.
I'd call it 53, and even 53 is generous. I mean, if I'm being honest, it's more like 12.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as this is what I was thinking about, that this is a movie about a young man's self-discovery through 54.
Yes.
It's not a movie about Studio 54.
Yes.
It just takes place in Studio 54.
Yes.
And Steve Rubell happens to be a character.
Yeah.
I think the definitive Studio 54 movie has yet to be made.
Mm-hmm. Like a movie that foregrounds Studio 54 specifically and is also good. What is the
story of Studio 54? Yeah, exactly. Give me the Wolf of Wall Street version of Studio 54.
Man, we've talked about Joker and Wolf of Wall Street now. We need to cleanse the timeline.
Get ready, I'm about to bring up Deadpool.
Oh my god. Okay, a portrait of a lady on fire. Okay, move on. First cow.
So I don't know.
I'm sorry. Do you think Steve Rubell would let the first cow from the movie First Cow into Studio 54?
He let a goat in, so I would say yes.
You know what? Crazy enough to work. I think that would empty out the club pretty quick. I mean, it's gross enough. Like a goat has enough of a smell, but a cow is gonna smoke everybody out of that place way faster.
God, where to start with this? Oh yeah. Well, I got some specs to run down. Before we begin, just to kind of put this in context. So the theatrical cut we talked about, August 28th, 1998. This cut, the director's cut, released February 7th, 2015.
Yes.
And it premiered at the Berlin International Film Festival, and it tours the festival circuit roughly until the end of May. So about 3.5 months of festival touring.
And now, stop me if I'm stepping on your toes here, but the genesis of this cut is there. Like shortly after the theatrical cut dropped, basically a bootleg VHS with some assemblage of this version of the movie screened at Outfest or something in the early 2000s in New York, and it became popular that way. Correct?
I'm sure. I mean, I watched this with the director's cut. With the director's commentary. As well. He talked a little bit about that. I'm sure Lewis is going to illuminate us on that as well in a little bit here, but that is the general sense I got. Definitely The bootleg version of it has been kind of bandied about for many, many years. As so
much
it
like
being
much like Shane is bandied about Studio 54.
As to it being the reason that we get a director's cut, I don't know that that's the case, and that's where I think Lewis is going to bring his expertise, because there is a story behind, as we talked last week, why a movie like 54 gets a director's cut this severe of a difference versus your Blade Runners and your Apocalypse Nows.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I having seen the director's cut of Apocalypse Now, I'm kind of like, actually, I think the studios had the right idea. I don't think we needed to go to the French plantation, personally. I don't know if I needed to see the Playboy bunnies again.
I mean, they're different movies to me. I like vibing out with the Redux. I get it. I would, if you're gonna release a theatrical cut, get rid of that shit 100%. But like, if I'm in that mood, I'm like, I'll just vibe out here. That's fine.
Yeah. I want to spend a little longer
give
in
me this
Vietnam.
big imperial feast. The last little bit here I have is, so it does the festival circuit, and then it starts with its internet premieres in the US and UK roughly around June 2nd, 2015. That is 17, 18 years after the theatrical cut, or at least after they finished making the first movie. So
yeah,
that's a long time. Like Blade Runner at least is like, there's a theatrical cut, and then like 5 years later the next cut comes up, and then it's no more than 10 years later before the director's cut, and then the final cut comes out like less than 10 years after that. To have 15 years between a movie that's why we're doing it here was forgotten.
Yes.
Except for the few who saw how good the bootleg was, and I'm curious what the story is behind like the rallying cry to get this made.
Yeah, because there was, I feel like there was never a time when people weren't talking about Blade Runner. Like,
right.
And there was
some insufferable conversation about, was he a replicant or wasn't he a replicant?
Exactly. But, even in the early 80s, just white dudes were sitting down with a tape recorder and recording their conversations about Blade Runner and handing it out to people on the street. It was the earliest form of what we're doing here. But that was a thing that always had a passionate fan base. And so, for this to get to where it is I don't want to, there was definitely a passionate fan base for this bootleg of 54, but it was just they had a much bigger boulder to roll up a much taller hill.
The other thing too is like this, it's during the internet era, but it's not during the like release the Snyder cut era of fan base, yelling to the skies.
You said Snyder cut. We're 3 for 3, man. No amount of first cows can help us now.
I'm going there. So like, there wasn't even like the centralized place for the fan's voice to be heard to make this. It feels like there's something else going on behind the scenes, and I don't have the answers. Maybe you do. I don't know, but
when
I'm
do
not
I
even
ever
sure
have
that
the answers on this
I'm
show?
not even sure that our guest today, Lewis, will have the answers, but he'll at least have a story, and he's much more of an expert on all this stuff than us. And I'm ready to go into the deep dive on this, but I just generally want to get a sense of your response to this version versus the last one. How did you experience this one?
I like this better. I like this better than the one we saw previously. I may have already even said that, and even if I didn't, it's kind of a given. I don't think it's a perfect film. There's things that I still find myself wanting from the movie, stuff that I wish was explored more. But this is a much more just satisfying story because there are characters that you can identify with and empathize with, and it's just easier to understand not just people's motivation from scene to scene, but like spatially where they are from scene to scene.
You mean basic cinematic storytelling techniques?
Just basic stuff that has been around for about 100 years is in more evidence here. The thing that pissed me off so much about the theatrical cut, the morality play of suddenly shaming us and shaming Studio 54 and it's bad, that doesn't bug me here because because this is a movie about Shane and the things Shane is doing to himself. Yeah. When it comes around to this whole thing of like, this place did that to her, it's not like he's saying like the movie is not saying Studio 54 did this. He's saying the culture of dehumanization and the process of dehumanization and objectification that I have gone through. Like, all of the criticisms that are leveled at the end is him, like, thinking out loud about the journey that he's been on, and it's not the movie wagging the finger at a place where a lot of people are having a good time. So it's remarkable how much just a few, I mean, there's a lot of different stuff in here, but a lot of these sequences that make that morality play argument that pissed me off so much are still present, but there's just different cuts and alterations of it completely change the meaning and intent.
I would, because this is a big thing for me, is say as well that it's at the end of the movie, it's still the journey he's on. Whereas the theatrical cut tries to, like, wrap it up and all in a nice bow, and him and Neve Campbell get together, and they're going to be the king and queen of New Jersey.
Yep. His whole life is figured out. 19 years old, he's got it.
The fact that this film ends with having played out the kind of love triangle that we only alluded to last week.
Yeah.
The actual love triangle between Breckin, Meyer, Salma Hayek, and Ryan Phillippe, and him not just going from a trash bag into a limo, it's him going from a trash bag into, the three of them under her fur coat is like, well, this is a way to wrap up the movie with an ellipses, literally, three of them. But their situation isn't tenable. Their story's going to continue, and to me, that is much more satisfying to, like, know that the characters are going to continue to exist after the film. It makes it feel much more richer to me.
Yes.
That we've watched a period of this guy's life that is self-discovery, and he's come to a realization, but following the events of this film, he then will continue to apply what he's learned and go through new stuff. Like, it feels like such more a richly developed character.
Yes, like, it doesn't, like, coming out of this, and I know that this is part, and maybe we'll hear more about this when we talk to our guest, but, like, the audience reaction when they screened this in Long Island was people saying, oh, the characters are unlikable, I don't get where they end up, because I can see somebody looking at this and being like, well, all these people did kind of shitty stuff to each other, and now at the end of the movie, they're all just still together. It seems like they're just going to remain in a self-destructive cycle of kind of screwing each other over, taking advantage of each other, kind of forgiving each other, but not making any changes. And it's like, well, that's being young? Like, I don't know, like, this is...
Right.
Like there's, it's like, yeah, it's messy. Their relationships with each other are messy, and that's... That and they end the movie messy, which I like a lot more than the theatrical cut, which kind of suggests that, like, oh yeah, and then I was managing a couple restaurants, and hey, Greg and Anita were doing great too. Like it's like, no one comes out of this a fixed better person. They've all learned a couple things.
It's the I think a telltale sign of a bad film is you can have movies about unlikable characters, and as long as they're done well, you're not going to care. You're still going to feel like you've gone on a journey with them.
Sure.
See virtually any Martin Scorsese film.
Yeah.
I'm really just chalking up. Get the scoreboard out tonight.
I know, man. We are ascending to a new level of podcasting.
But when you have a movie that depicts unlikable characters in unrelatable situations, and it's chopped up, and it's done poorly, then it's going to be criticized all the more for having unlikable characters, because that's what you're going to focus on. I feel like the general audience doesn't focus on the techniques. They're not going to recognize, oh, that was choppy editing. They're going to be focusing on, like, oh, he made a shitty decision and now he's living through it, and I don't want to have to watch that, and I'm not getting anything from this except having to endure it.
Yeah. And I mean, that is one of the great ironies of this cut, is because this movie was butchered up into the theatrical edition and given all of this voiceover because presumably some genius in a corner office thought this is too hard to understand. But I actually find this version without voiceover, except for a couple lines at the beginning, like, I find this much easier to understand, because just like the sequences aren't chopped up into a million little pieces, so it's like we see a scene happen with him like outside the club, we see him go into the club and walk around, we see him go upstairs. It's not like we see him getting into the club and then a montage of like Studio 54 was the hottest place in the world and this happened and this happened, and so instead we're just like kind of following we're grounded enough to be able to follow individual characters' stories. This is just so much easier to understand because it's like I see who the character is, I know who they are because I have watched them actually go through experiences, have things happen to them and react to them rather than seeing snippets of it. Well, it's explained to me what's going on. And it's just it's a much more satisfying experience, but it's also just one that, like, it's a narrative that a human mind can follow, which I think the original really isn't. It's just like a trailer that is 90 minutes long.
Well, one thing I wanted to do, but just didn't have the time really, was to go back and watch the theatrical cut after having done all this director's cut stuff, because I wonder how much of that VO is for consistency. Like, they have to, I think by necessity, they have to use the VO to explain changes that weren't in the initial script. And that's just the easiest way to do that. But it probably became necessary more toward the second half of the film, and just so that you weren't suddenly getting VO for the second half of the film, they're like, well, let's just tack it on throughout and make it, seem like an intentional choice.
I agree with you, and also that is also ironic because so much other sloppy stuff was going on in that cut that they're like, no, it's going to seem weird and disjointed if there's only voiceover in the second half of the movie.
But all right, before we get into this, I want to give my experience, because
no. Only I talk. Only what? Go on.
Maybe I'm not able to be objective about this film anymore, because I cannot think of another film that, from first viewing to how I currently feel in such a short amount of time, my opinion has changed so drastically. Listen, I'm only going to say this because I think it's necessary context for this conversation. Generally, I think giving star ratings is bullshit. I do it on Letterboxd for my own understanding of how did I feel about that film when I saw it. It's purely just for me. It's my own organizational system.
In the privacy of your own home, you give star ratings, but never in public.
For my own, as I said, my own organization. Judging a movie's quality by crowdsourcing the amount of stars that a number of people give it, I think is bullshit. That said, when I first watched the theatrical cut of this, not knowing the drama of the director's cut, not knowing anything but the text of what I saw, it was like a 1.5 star for me. It was laughable. I just would. It's not that I didn't, find it a oddly entertaining but very unsatisfying experience. I just thought it was like hokey, cheesy, and like, what the fuck were they trying to do with this thing? Learning about the director's cut, watching it the second time, and seeing like, oh, I can see the seams of where this is stitched together now, and just from viewing 1 to viewing 2, like, bumped up at least 1 star, so it was like 2.5 stars. Because I can see the story it's trying to be. By the time I was done watching the director's cut for the second time, so I've seen this movie 4 times in the last 2 weeks.
What's 54 times 4? I'm not good enough. That's like 200. What, 216 something?
Something like that. Like, it became a maybe if I'm being honest, a 3.5 star, but like a favored 3.5 star. So like, I have a lot of respect for this movie. I think that there are some things that like are just kind of outside of my experience, but I find interesting, but I can't like emotionally hook into that are keeping me from like a 5-star film or anything. But I thoroughly enjoy this movie. I ended up buying the director's cut, and I am looking forward to going back and watching it. My partner is the only person in the world I know who has seen 54 when it first came out. And I am so curious to show her the director's cut, because she's forgotten the movie. basically.
As everyone did, yes.
As everyone did. And I'm curious, like, if she watches the director's cut, which is actually a full story now.
A real movie, yeah.
How that would fuck with her memory of the original, having not seen it in 20 years.
She's going to be getting weird sense memories of like, wait, wasn't Salma Hayek supposed to teach a dance class to suburban disco fans somewhere in here? Where did that go? Well, one thing, I think the only thing that I missed from the theatrical cut, and I fully recognize why it's not in here because it's like a different vibe. Like the theatrical cut starts with some dumb montage, but then they fade up the chorus of "Don't Leave Me This Way," this disco song with a real driving chorus, and the numbers 54 appear on screen, and they just come closer and closer, and they get so big and fat and thick that they fill the whole screen, and then they open like doors to a club, and you push inward, and the movie goes on. That's cool, and if that was Harvey Weinstein's idea, then I feel bad giving it any credit, but I liked that. And I understand this is a more somber, thoughtful movie.
And the director's cut title sequences you're actually pushing backwards away from things. And he commented on that in the commentary, saying, if you notice in the theatrical cut, things are coming at you. In this one, we're going toward them.
Okay. Interesting. See, this is why I shouldn't have merely rented it on Amazon, but actually gone all the way with the director's cut or with the Blu-ray.
Oh God. Okay. Do you want to like start getting into some of the like detailed differences of this? Because
yes.
I have a number of things. Where do you think is a good place to start?
Let's talk about Shane, baby, and specifically, let's talk about. In the theatrical cut of the movie, there's this weird subplot where Greg has started stealing money from 54. Like, he's stealing cash out of the garbage bag in the ceiling.
That's crime stuff. Yeah, I got a lot to talk about crime stuff.
Yeah, so in this movie, in the movie that the writer and director wanted to show us, Shane begins stealing money from the garbage bags of cash stashed in the ceiling. And, Shane steals like $1,000 because he's short on cash. Steve knows that he did it, and he's short on the cut that he's giving to the mob or whoever is financing him. But he can't fire Shane because he likes Shane, because Shane is too hot to fire. He's too big of a hit. So he fires his accountant instead. And then his accountant gets pissed off about that and tells the IRS about what's going on.
Such a great example of how such little editing can tell such a massive story.
Yes.
At the end, when the IRS is raiding the place, Shane
amazing.
Shane opens the door, finds the IRS, and is about to go tell Steve. But when he opens the door, he sees the IRS reaching in the ceiling for the bag of money. There's a single shot of the accountant with the IRS indicating, no dialogue, nothing, just indicating she got pissed off for being fired for no reason, and she's the one that informed on the IRS. Like, how beautiful is that? And it completely recontextualizes everything.
Everything. It is. I am going to be thinking about that specific sequence for like this is burrowed into my memory. This movie is unforgotten now because he opens the door and it's just like dudes standing on the desk, and we're going to zoom in on like the guy in the suit. He's got a badge on. He looks at the other agent. The thing zooms to him. That agent looks across the room. Camera pans, and then we're looking at the accountant standing with them, giving this kind of apologetic look to Shane, and then they just needle drop on "Don't Leave Me This Way" by Grace Jones, and we're just off to the races. Third act. It's all falling apart. It is so good. It is such a great like capper to all of the drama that's been going on.
You called it last week. That we would cut out all of the IRS subplot and just have them Monty Python and the Holy Grail at the end. And it works. I was skeptical, and it's so much better.
It made me so mad. I was hooting and hollering when I watched this because we see, in both versions of the film, we see Steve Rubell being interviewed on TV, and he's talking about how he doesn't really pay taxes, or how like he's just openly admitting that he's doing tax evasion. And then in this version, he also talks about how his view that through pursuit of pleasure we can eventually enter the palace of wisdom, which that will put a pin in that. But so this interview on TV, in this cut of the movie, it's Shane and his dad are watching it together early on, like when Shane is working at the club, and his dad is, this is kind of a pretext for them to fight, and his dad going like, I don't like you going there, that's a messed up place, you should go to college or something instead, and they have this big blow up.
Yeah, earmark that to talk about in a second, but go ahead.
In the theatrical cut, they have, it's that interview, but it's being watched by the two IRS agents, and then they have a conversation about, oh man, we got to get this guy for evading his taxes. How stupid did Miramax think we were? That no, simply simply the abundant cash going into garbage bags getting put in vans. No one will guess that this is illegal activity or that the government is suspicious about it. No. We need to show the police watching Steve Rubell on TV say he doesn't pay taxes for this to land. That's the only way it will work.
Oh man.
I just this is so much better. This movie is so much better.
Well, let's keep talking about the crimes part and round that out before we get more into Shane.
Do you think Steve Rubell would let Grindelwald into Studio 54? I mean, it's a lot of crimes.
He does commit a lot of crimes. Are they the crimes that would benefit Studio 54 or Steve Rubell? I mean, he could probably do some sort of wand magic and make a bunch of, a bed of money appear.
I mean, and we know Steve Rubell loves beds of money. I mean, look, I feel like the Harry Potter books probably don't go into this, but there's got to be some kind of summon cocaine spell. Like, I feel like every good nightclub has at least one wizard who's really keeping things running.
I mean, in 54, you just do that spell where it's like, find whatever this thing is that I'm looking for in this room, and it comes to you.
True.
You just say, summon cocaine, whatever the fucking spell name is. Summon cocaine, and then you're just like, like a snow, like Truman Capote, like all the glitter falling on Truman Capote. It's just a snow cloud of cocaine falling on you.
You do that in the coat check room, and cocaine is just flying out of all the coat pockets and straight up your nose.
Cocaine.
That's magic. Oh, hey, let's quit the podcast and market that great idea.
Cocaine. It's just a bunch of cocaine you found in the pockets of your old coat from the 80s.
I mean, look, there's going to be lint, but there's also cocaine.
Parents, they have Cheerios. Executives in the 80s, they have cocaine.
If you mix up your coats, your kid is not going to take a nap for like a week.
Okay, back to the crimes. The through line of the crimes was separating out the kind of pedantic IRS watching the TV bullshit.
Yeah.
Just the confusing nature of Greg taking the money, Shane going to Steve and saying, I took the money, and that story making it look like he's trying to take the blame off of Greg, when in reality he's trying to actually confess.
Yeah.
This version was just, it made so much more sense. I was even struggling to remember the convoluted nature of the theatrical cut and how that all transpired. And I'm like, wait, I don't think that actually made sense, and I just kind of took it for face value.
I mean, you're so punch drunk in the theatrical cut from just getting bludgeoned with montages and scenes that were shot months later that have nothing to do with the rest of the movie, that at some point you kind of just stop recording. Like when you know that the movie doesn't care about making sense on a subconscious level, you kind of stop following it. You just stop paying attention. Like, if you're not going to do your part, I'm not going to do my part.
And a lot of the drug dealer stuff. Although what I liked about, as far as like the drug crime thing goes, like Greg doesn't steal the money, but he is more ingrained in the drug dealing culture in the director's cut.
Yes.
And when the IRS come or the cops come, he gets freaked out because he's had this like lunch pail filled with different types of drugs to supply the club with.
Yeah.
And he walks into the back room and sees a cop digging through his lunchbox full of drugs and just is like, oh shit, and turns and bolts out the door. And that became a much more coherent, like, I'm not gonna do the sex stuff to get position here, but I will, this is the way that I will bend the rules to make myself valuable to this club, is by supplying party favors.
And I'm not a lawyer, but I think as far as the police are concerned, selling cocaine and amyl in a nightclub is less bending the rules and more breaking the actual laws. I don't know the whole, Your Honor, it was either that or let a guy suck my dick. I mean, what did you want me to do?
But narratively in this one, it felt more satisfying. We keep saying that, but it made more sense to Breckin Meyer's character, because there's the whole thing in both cuts of the confrontation between him and Steve Rubell on the bed of money, saying, I want to suck your cock, and him starting to undo his pants is like, I can't do it, I love my wife. And like this one, he's very much, there's like these little tiny extended bits of conversation throughout, and here he actually gets to verbalize the importance of starting a family. Like, I don't want this life. I'm just here because it's a great way to make money, and I love Anita, and this is how we're going to build a family. This is how we're going to get started. Yeah, exactly. And I almost, I don't know, I feel like there are places kind of like just Greg's whole deal where it's like, I would have liked to have kind of gotten more of like, how is Greg making sense of all this in his head? Like, because he's out there, he's selling drugs and doing drugs and having quite a good time. So like, how I would love to kind of know what his thought process is of like, okay, how much longer are we doing this before we have the kid, before we have a baby? I mean, I'm not criticizing so much. I'm just saying that there is a lot more to ask questions about and wonder about with Greg than there ever was before. Well, this is, I mean, we talked a lot about the comparisons to Boogie Night last week, but
Boogie Night, just singular.
Is that what I said?
You said Boogie Night.
The Boogie Night.
That's my favorite member of the round table. King Arthur's coolest friend.
You got the Green Knight, you got Arthur, you've got Lancelot, and Boogie Night.
Yeah, the Boogie Knight was King Arthur's wizard who summoned cocaine for him.
After Merlin dies.
Merlin dies of a cocaine overdose, much like Disco Dottie.
What was I going to say? Right. The comparisons to Boogie Night we made a lot last week. However, what strikes me is this is a movie that would benefit, I feel like, from a longer runtime a la Boogie Nights. Granted, Boogie Nights has much more characters to talk about and a wider tapestry to create, where I feel like adding any more characters and storylines to this probably isn't a good idea.
Yeah,
but at least
agreed.
Make this like a 2.5-hour movie, not the 3:15 or whatever Boogie Nights is. Give us a little bit more room to develop the backstories of each of those characters, which is like, I think when you're talking about getting it greenlit from a script, you have to keep it short and sweet, and like that 90 to 100 page sweet spot that people like to greenlight things on for budget reasons and for all kinds of reasons,
and for executives having short attention spans and not wanting to read a particularly long script reasons.
So like, I see like the limitations of that don't feel like a filmmaking thing or an editing thing. It feels like if I wanted to get this movie made, I had to make sacrifices in the storytelling, and that's what comes of it.
Exactly. And I think that we keep saying satisfied or unsatisfied here, which in a movie about pleasure is kind of an interesting set of choices to make. But I feel like the aspects where I am left sort of unsatisfied in terms of just, well, I'm we see their relationships between, Shane and Greg and Anita of like, Shane and Anita hooking up, but then it's like, no, we can't do this, and Greg kind of forgiving the various infidelities along the way. It's like, I again, there's just like, I feel like for that to really land and make more sense, I would just love to see more of like each of the characters' interiority and what's driving them to make these decisions. And I fully understand that even in a director's cut, like even when he was on set, Mark Christopher he could only do so much. Like he only had like a certain amount had been cut even just to get to principal photography. Like he'd already had to compromise on his vision a certain amount. So it's like he can only reconstruct the material that he was able to shoot. So the things that leave me wanting are not necessarily on him or a fault of the filmmaking, which is basically what you said.
That said, though, I mean, let's go back to talking about Shane, the main character, who we do presumably, get as much backstory as any character on here. There are little details included here that I can
man.
see, even from like a non-director's cut sort of, a non-butchered theatrical cut. I mean, just a general, theatrical cut that you need to trim for time or whatever. I can see why some of these things would be cut, but man, do they make a difference.
Yes.
And I'm thinking specifically, like, we talked about not knowing what his want was in the last one.
Yeah.
This whole idea, there's a 30-second scene between Ryan Phillippe and Breckin Meyer here where he says something to the extent of, I'm so close I can almost taste it.
Yeah.
And Breckin Meyer goes, what? He goes, everything. And just that 3 lines of dialogue gave me everything I didn't have from that theatrical cut to go, oh, that tells me the passion and everything that he's striving for.
Yes.
And also the emptiness and futility of what that ultimately is.
Yes. Like the interview with Steve Rubell that he and his dad watch on TV, where Steve Rubell is talking about, through this kind of hedonistic lifestyle, we can access the palace of wisdom. There is a scene later where he and Breckin Meyer are talking, and specifically about the fact that, like, Shane is deciding to sleep with men, and that Greg is unwilling to do that to get ahead. And basically, as the scene ends, Shane says to him, like, hey, buddy, I'm going for the palace of wisdom here. Like, it just sets up, like, the fact that he's calling back on this thing that Steve has said earlier, like, it sets up in such a really nicely understated way. Like, this is what he's going for. He thinks that he can achieve some higher understanding, some higher experience, he can fill some void within himself, so to speak, through coming to this club and experiencing true pleasure and being like an idol for all these people. And it's just, it doesn't take much to get that in there. And the way that this is established does not take up that much screen time, and yet it was removed. And this motivation for the main character.
It illuminates other things, that were cut that I also feel like damage this kind of through line, which is like the interview he does for the magazine.
Yeah. Yes. Oh man.
Just kind of a funny little characterization thing. Like, you in the theatrical cut, you see him and Breckin Meyer in a kind of padding scene between two bigger moments of him kind of like joking with Breckin Meyer doing a wild and crazy guy impression, Steve Martin impression behind the bar. But like in the director's cut, Shane actually says, I do impressions, and he does like a John Travolta at one point. He does I think he does Stallone at one point. He does Wild and Crazy Guy, and he's giving this interview to the magazine saying, I can do anybody. And that's the quote that they use, and you see that in the theatrical cut. It's the thread is so thin to begin with, and then lost entirely in the theatrical cut of this interview in this magazine being featured, being called Shane 54 is like this thing, this like what he can almost taste. Like, this is the lifestyle. I'm almost there, man. I can had this moment in the sun, but by having us see his ignorance for the futility of it, compared to like what is actually transpiring, they don't give a shit about you. The objectification of him, it shows us, the audience, how kind of unfulfilling that story is going to be for him. What the emptiness of that brass ring.
No, the whole thing of him so eagerly talking about his impressions to the photographer and using that line of I can do everyone, and that's the only he's like, where's the interview, and it's just that one quote over him shirtless there. Or like him at the dinner party. It makes all the stuff at the dinner party where they call him the most handsome troglodyte they've ever met. Like, it makes that so much more painful, because you see it that, like, he's trying to tell someone like, I like to do impressions, and they just cut him off. It's this whole aspect of him wanting to be an impressionist is, I think, so beautiful, because it really it sets up the fact that, like, no, I do have value as a human being. I'm not just abs. And also it's like kind of, there's almost a naivete to it. You almost want to just say, like, oh, honey, you just want to like pick him up and cuddle him. Like, oh, you want to be a professional impressionist, and you think You think all these people here care about that? Like, I know that I'm probably belittling him the same way that snobby rich people in the movie do, but like, there's something about that where it's like, that's earnest and sweet that you really care about that so much, and you're telling, that's like the most 19-year-old trying to sound cool thing in the world. Like, yeah, I do impressions. I'm pretty good at it. I'm gonna go pro. And to see him getting fed into this meat grinder, so to speak, of Studio 54 with that stars in his eyes attitude is kind of hurtful. Kind of heartbreaking.
I guess we don't have to spend too much more time on this, but worth mentioning, I think, just there are some sequences, shots, and that are reordered from the theatrical cut. The night he spends with Billy, who I thought was a pop star. This is how kind of messy, incomprehensible the theatrical cut is. Yeah, she's I think just kind of a socialite of the pop of the music world.
I think she's like a record executive specifically.
She at least knows record executives. Whether she is one, I'm still not sure on.
Based on the stuff she's saying at the end about we need to get photos of you before the ambulance arrives when she's trying to sign Anita. I don't know. Whatever. It's not important. But yes, she's not a pop star. She's just a connected socialite.
Whatever the case, she starts. Shane starts to, be involved with her. He thinks it's part of his like upward mobility in this world, but she's very much like, ooh, yummy, yummy candy.
Yeah.
The theatrical cut, you get like them in the club meeting for the first time over the vial of cocaine to her and him in the mirror with her hands down the front of his pants, and then they have sex. In the director's cut, what is much more telling to me is like they go from the studio directly to having sex.
Yes.
Then like it cuts back to something else, and the story's progressing. More time is being taken.
Yes.
And then the scene where she's dressing him for the party is happening, and it brings that objectification to much more of the forefront than the previous version, because she's like, let me dress my doll to show off to my friends.
Yeah, the simply allowing us as the audience to get a sense for the passage of time, the fact that they have been together for a number of nights, a number of weeks, their relationship is progressing, is like, it's like, okay, now I suddenly get what this character means to the movie. I get what his emotional headspace is, and it leads us into a montage in this cut of the movie where it's like she is then telling one of her female friends about like, oh yeah, he's amazing, he fucked me so hard I passed out, and then it's like, they're all in a hot tub together, and then her friend comes over and sits next to him and starts fooling around with him, and then he's sleeping with her, and then like a male friend is hearing about how good he was from that friend, and then it's him and the male friend together in the hot tub, and it's just they set up. This is a montage that gives you the sense of the passage of time, and also gives you the sense of how, okay, he's in this group of people. We're seeing him with each of the people in this group, and it gives you the sense of like, he's being passed around by these folks. He is an object, and he is too drunk on all the experiences and the nice things they're giving him and dressing him with to think about it. And then that sequence ends with him getting chlamydia, and it's like, okay, this just makes more sense than it did in the theatrical cut, where just kind of in the middle of the movie he's got chlamydia, and it's like, well, okay, I mean, he had, but it's just like, because he was working at that club where people have sex, like, shame on him, you must be punished for Club 54 existing. It's just little changes to order and the way scenes play out, and I guess the big change of acknowledging that gay stuff is happening. Those are the two.
Yeah, it's just a tiny little thing like that.
I do want to actually, I don't know if I'm rushing us. I don't think the movie, even as the director's cut, it's not that gay of a movie. I'm not the arbiter of this, but I've seen a lot of other movies, even from this time period, that like focus more squarely on gay life, gay queer relationships, things like that. Like, this movie, basically all it does is sort of acknowledge that gay and bisexual men exist and have desire. It's like at the end of the movie, it's not like the movie ends with him and Breckin Meyer getting together. Like when he kisses Breckin Meyer's like, no, thank you, I'm straight, whatever. Like this is not like the quote unquote gay issue movie. This isn't like Brokeback Mountain not getting Best Picture because people are scared about it.
We talked a little bit about how this fits into new queer cinema and how we're both woefully inadequate to talk about that,
and woefully inadequate in general, but that's another story.
Yes. And you may have made that joke last week.
I'm woefully uncreative as well. This is part of my inadequacy.
The thing about those stories is, like, while they often do push like certain issues to the front, they aren't always like capital I issue movies.
Yeah.
And what I think this film does, in that vein, it does feel new queer cinema adjacent. Though I'm not the one to determine that. The thing that it does, though, is while it does have storylines about bisexuality or homosexuality, whatever terms you want to apply to it, it's about the gaze, and I think I mentioned that last time. And again, G-A-Z-E, not G-A-Y-S.
Yeah.
In that, like, what we're looking at and what the characters are enamored with and the culture that is permeating the vibe and the thrust of the movie. It's we're constantly kind of invited to gape at Ryan Phillippe's body. While he's being objectified, we are also kind of like looking at his body. We're looking at the bodies of the people in Studio 54,
sure.
Male, female, what have you, but just kind of the general atmosphere of it, the music, the pacing. I think all of these things are atypical from your masculine or your heterosexual sort of. You compare it. I think it's a good comparison between this and Boogie Nights. When you look at Mark Wahlberg's body in Boogie Nights, I don't think from a sort of queer perspective, we're invited to look at him looking at his own body. It's through a narcissistic perspective.
Yes. I've been thinking about this actually, and a way that this contrasts with Boogie Nights. Like, so much of this movie, particularly in this director's cut, it is about desire. It is about coveting things. It is about pleasure specifically. So, as someone who watches Boogie Nights a lot, and self-discovery,
I think that's maybe one of the biggest parts of this.
Yeah, certainly. But desire and pleasure as themes, you see characters experiencing that. Boogie Nights, for a movie that is all about sex and has a lot of sex in it, nobody ever really desires sex. No one in that movie is having sex because they're horny. They're having sex because it's their job. Like, maybe they enjoy sex.
It's often the only thing they're good at.
Yes, exactly. It's like I'm not necessarily doing this because I want to in this moment or under these circumstances with a million people watching me and filming me, but I kind of have to. All the characters in Boogie Nights are more or less ambivalent about the sex. It's kind of just them at work with their lunch pail and everything, and if they look like they're enjoying it, they're acting, usually poorly. I mean, there's pleasure in other regards of, they're having fun, dancing at the nightclub or whatever, but just desire is not really present in Boogie Nights, or when it is, it's peripheral characters who look kind of weird and gross and awkward for experiencing desire. So it's the two different perspectives on it, and the way that these two movies that superficially might look very similar as movies about nightclubs in the 70s and sex handle it in completely different ways, and that really comes through in the director's cut.
I think the central to that, as I said, is the self-discovery, but people aren't Mark Wahlberg isn't finding himself, or at least isn't setting out to find himself through porn. He may or may not over the course of the film, but that's not what he's setting out to do. This film is very much about, I can't explore myself in this home environment. I'm constantly desiring to go not only to New York, but Studio 54 specifically. And then once I'm there, it's the draw of like-minded people. I can feel free to explore myself here and, find people that are going to support that or help me explore. And those are themes that I think are much more aligned with the new queer cinema, and are, as far as what was cut from the theatrical cut, interesting, because you're still left with the ghost of that in the theatrical cut. But
Yes.
the teeth have really been taken out, particularly removing, let's just talk real fast about the father stuff.
Yes,
We knew
absolutely.
that there was going to be some stuff in this that wasn't in the theatrical cut.
Yeah.
It seems it's not very extreme, especially by 2024 standards, but
No.
it is. You could sense the homophobia and the racism that goes on in the home.
Yeah, like he talks about watching a black woman sing at the club, and his dad uses some slurs in reference to that. And his dad, I think, makes one, offhanded comment to disapproving of the gay culture at the club. What I found interesting about the way his dad is represented in this movie is that, like, his dad is a bigot, and I'm going to say his dad is not a cool dude, but he's also not like a hateful, abusive, bottle-throwing ogre.
Yeah.
He's like saying to him, like, son, I'm really worried about you going there. You need to go to college. You need to make it. Like, it's I've not seen that kind of representation of, like, the bad conservative dad in a movie. I mean, it's interesting. It's like deeper and more nuanced. Like, yeah, his dad sucks and has toxic ideas, but they're also rooted in this, like, I love my son. I want what's best for him, and what's best for him is to be in a place where there are only white people and no gays.
And I think that's illustrated by a moment that's actually in both cuts, but the fact that Ryan Phillippe, just when he's moving out, he just has a little box of stuff. He comes down the stairs, says, all right, I guess I'll see you later, Dad, and continues walking out the front door while his dad sits in the chair watching TV and just, like, says bye. And once Shane's out the door, his dad gets up and walks to the door and looks through the window to watch him walk away, where it's like, oh, you really get the sense that this character wants something beyond what he's able to express.
Yes, exactly.
Or at least something else is going on beyond just being a mustache twisting villain.
Yeah, like there's multiple generations of men in this family who want something they can't express, and they don't know how to find it. And at least Shane is trying. Like, this is a way in which he's trying to kind of break that cycle, as he's going to go find himself and be able to express who he really is.
Also, just before we get off the family, we didn't talk last week about Heather Matarazzo, who is a staple of new queer cinema, as well as just a general great actress in her own right. She plays the sister to Ryan Phillippe.
Yeah.
I absolutely love her. I love her in everything. I haven't seen Hostel 2, but that said, welcome to the Dollhouse. But I'm a cheerleader with...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a...
with Natasha Lyonne, maybe. I can't remember if she's in that.
Does Natasha Lyonne count as a new queer cinema stalwart?
Maybe. Yeah, she's definitely in a lot, or some of the films. Princess Diaries is another big one that Heather Matarazzo was in.
Yeah. I feel like Princess Diaries does... I feel like that's not a new queer cinema film, though.
No,
I'm gonna take a guess.
I'm just talking about the career of Heather Matarazzo.
Sure.
Because neither is Hostel 2.
Yeah, probably not, no.
The Devil's Advocate. I mean, she's just kind of one of those faces that you don't forget. She keeps popping up in things. Oh, she's in Scream 3. So maybe Neve got her a role in that after this movie.
Okay, so something good did come out of the theatrical cut of this movie then. That's good to hear.
Yeah, anyway, so we didn't talk about her last week. I just wanted to mention her. She's always good. I think she's fantastic in this, just natural on screen.
As long as we're going from we're talking about family, if we're going to talk kind of about the found family aspect, I think this movie makes much better use of Disco Dottie, who I already liked in the last one, the very old woman who comes and dances at the club, and who meets him in civilian clothes when he's trying to buy penicillin for his chlamydia, and she, like, very sweetly helps him pay for it when he doesn't have money.
Here's the thing, like, I don't think much changed from the theatrical cut to the director's cut as far as her storyline is concerned, but everything that's changing around it makes her feel much more part of the tapestry of the place rather than just a gimmick.
Yes, it's not just a, oh, look at the rapping granny equivalent here. And it is clearer that she's kind of this bright spot. She's kind of the one person he's interacting with who does see him. And we do get one additional scene where, like, at the New Year's Eve party, after he's kissed Breckin, Meyer, and been rebuffed, he then goes and he smokes a whole bunch of opium with Billy, the record exec, and he's totally fucked up and freaking out behind the bar. And Disco Dottie comes up looking for drugs at the bar and then sees that he's messed up. And then she kind of drops her character and says, Shaney, honey, look at me. You're okay.
Oh, yeah,
Do you hear me? You're okay.
Part, yeah.
Which is just, it's this, and this is the same night that she dies. This is shortly before that.
Yep.
But, like, it's, she goes back into the sweet old lady voice that she spoke to him with at the pharmacy. She shows this real concern for him. It's very moving. It's very sweet in the midst of all this debauchery. And why did we lose? Why did that have to be cut out? What was so scary about showing us that, Miramax?
What was scary? Well, so you said it was opium. I guess I don't know my drugs well enough. I thought he was smoking crack.
I don't know if crack had been invented at that point.
Okay,
and also, if it was
fair.
crack, he's not going to be like slumping down behind the bar. He's going to be like one of the toddlers who gets the coat cane instead of the Cheerios.
Okay, that's a good point. That whole scene, like we speculated that there was a drug part cut out. There was less of it than I thought there would be, but at least we see him smoking something, and I'm sure. I mean, because we did hear from the trivia, Disney didn't want the drugs or the bisexuality in there, or tone down the drugs and cut out the bisexuality. So,
it's just like, why make a movie about Studio 54 then? Like, can we make a movie about Studio 54 with no gay people, limited drugs?
Well, right, exactly. It kind of makes you wonder why it was greenlit in the first place. I have so many questions to ask Lewis in a second here.
Yes, like perhaps why did Disney buy an acclaimed indie production company if they then didn't want to make movies about drugs?
All right.
Anyway,
listen, hold on. I got to get this out now so that we can really optimize our time with Lewis.
Yes,
Truman, hold me back. I'm gonna be on my best behavior here, but it has to be said. It has to be said.
Okay.
It fucking has to be said. Miramax produces and distributes Quentin Tarantino movies.
Yes, this is a known thing. And by the way, you're checking all the boxes for White Guy Podcasts today. This is truly we are we're becoming pure light. That's how white we've gotten at this point.
Well, listeners may know I am not. I have a lot of issues with Tarantino. New listeners might not know the depth of my problems with Tarantino.
Your problem is that his movies aren't long enough. They don't include enough references to older films passed off as his own. They're not talked about frequently enough in culture.
Listen, I don't have a problem with long movies at all, as long as they justify their length. The length of Quentin Tarantino movies isn't even my biggest problem with him. Whatever, you got me off track. The thing is, like, when you look at Disney owns Miramax. Miramax is putting out movies. Why do they choose this movie to cut back all of that stuff on, but allow all that stuff to go into a Tarantino movie? The thing is, like, the Tarantino movie, there is no bisexuality. There's only, like, characters like Quentin Tarantino plays in Pulp Fiction, where he's spewing out, the N-word and the F-word.
I mean, there's really not a lot of sex in general. There's no bisexuality. There's also no real heterosexuality in Tarantino movies. There's kind of just, people are too busy doing violence. Dude,
that's the thing. The sexuality it shouldn't be an issue because it's just the general lens in which we're used to looking at it. It's just it's a heterosexually made gaze movie. It's like that's just what it is. The values of a heterosexual world. We want our violence. We want the illusion of sex by men and women alike saying, calling. Well, I can't even use the words. I'm not comfortable using the words they use to describe what they describe in those movies. Makes me sound like such a square. I'm not a fan of using that particular language myself.
Look, I think that at the end of the day, the reason that this movie comes in for so much scrutiny from the studio is that. I mean, the fact that Boogie Nights, Showgirls, there are other movies with a lot of sex and a lot of drugs in them that don't get cut up that much. And, I talked some last week about how Paul Thomas Anderson faced the prospect of cuts to his movie, but was able to argue against it, and how Boogie Nights was helped by the fact that it's a movie about straight people having sex. It's also worth noting that the short film that Boogie Nights is based on, oh boy, I'm talking about Paul Thomas Anderson's short films, we're getting even whiter than before. In the short film that Boogie Nights is based on, the Mark Wahlberg character Dirk Diggler, obviously not played by Mark Wahlberg in the short, is gay and or at least bisexual. He is in a relationship with the character who would later be played by John C. Reilly, and that is not present in the theatrical cut, in the one that New Line put up the money for. So you just kind of see that process. It's it gets sanitized out even at the script level, and so I don't know. I guess I just come back to Miramax. Miramax released The Crying Game and Velvet Goldmine, and I've even I've read in articles about how the same year that this came out, they showed a clip from 54 at some kind of GLAAD awards gala, an organization that's promoting gay representation in movies. They weren't completely shying away from this stuff in other movies, and they were making other movies that focused more squarely on this stuff, whereas this movie is just it just sort of depicts queer people as a normal part of life and not even the main focus of the movie, and queerness is kind of just a piece of this guy's character, and it seems like that was so threatening that they had to butcher this movie.
I was going to mention Velvet Goldmine at some point because it comes out the same year as this movie. Todd Haynes. It's a brilliant movie. I really love Velvet Goldmine. I guess not something I'm studied up enough on to even comment upon. But I would be curious to read what is the nuance of this story, of this film, that makes them uncomfortable? Is it purely a economic thing where it's Boogie Nights was huge, we need to make this thing that is almost a Boogie Nights into more of a Boogie Nights to sell it to a wider audience? I mean, is it as simple as that? It feels like there's an agenda, but maybe it is as simple as that.
I think that always assuming that it's something very simple and very dumb is the right way to approach trying to figure out why studio executives made a choice. What is the dumbest, most craven, least well thought through excuse for them to do a thing? That's probably why they did the thing.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I guess it's the instinct is to want to see a more insidious plan when when someone's finally revealed for who they are. So you want to kind of retroactively go, oh well, this and that and the other thing. Now that we know what we know about Harvey Weinstein, and there's also a movie about the director. What was it called? Overnight. About the director of Boondock Saints, who.
Yes.
There's a whole thing it builds to in that movie where he tries to make us believe.
We're talking about Boondock Saints now? Really? We're a parody. We're a parody of ourselves. I never even thought we could get to Boondock Saints.
There's a whole point that they build to in that movie where it makes him seem like Harvey Weinstein put a hit out on the director. So you want a villain, you want there to be one person making evil choices, and he was. Maybe just not in the context we want to think of for this movie. It's probably just entirely economic.
I mean, A, it's probably entirely economic. B, we don't even, we want to imagine that it's Harvey Weinstein sitting there in the editing room making all these bad choices. It's probably one of his major domos, or I don't know why I used that word, one of his lieutenants, making these calls, the assistant vice president of Miramax or whatever doing this.
Well, I want to get to Lewis here. So let's wrap up any last thoughts. I'm just gonna kind of go in rapid succession, and you do the same. We'll just do color commentary on them.
Yeah.
One big thing, the end of this movie, the delineation between Christmas and New Year's, it makes so much more sense. In the theatrical cut, the last third of the movie just feels like one big party. I can't tell front to end.
It's like crew years. Yeah.
The director's cut does away with the welcome back party entirely.
So gross.
Which is awesome.
Yes.
The movie director's cut ends. Steve Rubell put into the IRS cop car, taken off,
taken to tax jail.
Breckin, Meyer, Salma Hayek, and Ryan Phillippe walking down the street arm in arm, essentially, and Ryan Phillippe telling Neve Campbell, "No, I don't want to get in your limo," and Neve Campbell driving off.
Seeing Ryan Phillippe walking down the street, wrapping himself in the garbage bags, and seeing that limo in the background lurking, and knowing how gross it was in the theatrical cut, it's like seeing the shark fin, out there circling, but then the limo pulls away and the shark is gone. You're all right. Neve Campbell can't hurt you.
Speaking of backgrounds, there's a scene, not the actual, like the big dinner scene that we have, but there is another, like, kind of, as we're seeing him coming up the ranks of the social circles, there's like, they all go out to eat at like a famous restaurant. Yeah. And in the commentary, they're pointing out, like, they actually populated that restaurant with real celebrities. You can see Art Garfunkel behind Ryan Phillippe in one of the shots.
Now, okay, when you say populated the restaurant with real celebrities, you mean actors dressed up as fake celebrities?
No, I mean real celebrities.
Wait, Art Garfunkel was in 54, and Miramax is like, no, cut him out. Cut him out.
Peter Bogdanovich is in that scene. Here's another funny thing. They originally shot, for the opening sequence of all the celebrities coming into 54, a number of celebrity cameos going in. For time's sake, they cut them out of the theatrical cut. For preference sake, he decided not to show in the director's cut Donald Trump getting out of the limo and going into Studio 54.
Motherfucker would just be in any movie. Oh man. I gotta say, okay, I was wondering because I saw his name in the credits because I watched the whole credits this time, and like the credits for this movie have aged really badly, and that's not a slight on the director, but this is a movie that has Harvey Weinstein. No, but the credits it's got Harvey Weinstein, it's got Ron Jeremy and Donald Trump all in the credits for the same movie.
I'm sure there's more in there that we don't even know about.
Probably so. Honestly, I mean, I hate to admit it, but honestly, Ryan Phillippe isn't completely in the clear either. Okay. So speaking of garbage, though, this is a segue. This cut of the movie does a great job of illustrating how the money is flowing at 54 and how garbage bags play in, because it starts off, you see money getting taken from the cash register, put into bags. We see the bags going upstairs. They're being stored in the ceiling. We see the bags getting taken out, put in the van. And then at the end of the movie, then it suddenly makes sense. Oh, he's like, Ryan Phillippe has got nothing and he's wrapping himself in just an empty garbage bag. So I think, personally, I think that is the best symbolic use of a plastic trash bag in a late 90s movie. I don't think any movie has ever done it better.
Are you forgetting about another film that has a overuse of VO, perhaps, that comes out 2 years after this movie, or 1 year after this movie?
Wait, well, it couldn't possibly be a movie with a really problematic leading man who has also fallen from grace in the past 20 years, could it? Look, the guy, the kid in American Beauty is being like, this bag blowing around in the wind is the most beautiful thing I've ever filmed. It's like, no, it's not. Ryan Phillippe isn't wrapping himself up in the bag. That's the most beautiful thing.
Okay, what else do I want to say? We didn't talk about the love triangle very much. Let's talk about that real quick. This one does a much better job, I think, of showing Shane's, not intentions, but like the need for, or not the need, how he confuses pleasure, romance, family, friends, when they invite him into their home, Salma Hayek and Breckin Meyer.
Yeah.
That's tied up with him exploring himself in all this newfound sexuality.
Yeah.
And as he's exploring, relationships with men in the club, he's spending all this time with Greg and spending all this time with Anita. It makes sense now, I think, that he's like confused and wants to, he's feeling feelings he hasn't felt before and acting on them.
He's also kind of unsure of how to, like, what do I bring? What value do I bring unless I am having sex with people?
Point.
Like this is a part of how I relate to people, or how he is being told. This is what my value is. So it's like,
I didn't even pick up on that, but that's brilliant. Yeah.
He says at one point something about how you guys do so much for me, and like it's in relation to something else. He says that to Salma Hayek, but it's like this, and also the scene with Breckin Meyer where he kisses him. They've just had this really, in-depth and really sweet conversation about how they both hate Christmas and how they feel so connected to each other and everything. And then he kisses him because it's just like, is this what relationships are? I don't know. Right. This is kind of my first adult life experience.
Yeah. It's such a, I mean, it's awkward and uncomfortable, but intentionally so. And I feel like relatable in a lot of ways, just kind of feeling your way through how do I do this? This confusing feeling, which is like when you're just brought up on cartoons and stuff, you're like, oh, this means we're in love. And, love means I give you a kissy. Like the different.
Yeah. And you call it that too.
You don't call it that?
No, I don't call them kissies. I call them smoochies.
Smoochies. Well, I got a death to a smoochie that we might cover sometime.
No. Too many people remember Jon Stewart, his wonderful, beautiful acting career
and haircut in that movie.
Another observation I had watching this movie, because we get some more extended scenes with him and Salma Hayek, and him being on drugs and Salma Hayek saying, "Hey, you're too on drugs. You need some cocaine." It just occurred to me watching this, I've never tried cocaine. I don't want to try cocaine. If Salma Hayek offered me cocaine, I would do the cocaine. And that's all I have to say about that.
You wouldn't do Michael Caine?
I wouldn't do your cocaine. No, I wouldn't. I would do
Michael Caine.
Your cocaine. I would do. I know what you're doing. I would only do it if it was offered to me by international billionaire arms dealer Greg Simons pretending to be my cocaine.
My cocaine.
Yeah.
You wouldn't. I'm trying to make a connection between cocaine and blow the bloody doors off, and I can't do it.
You know what? That's close enough. It's an IKEA reference.
IKEA jokes. I want to talk real quick about Mike Myers.
Yes.
You put in my brain, because I was very unsure as to whether or not this is a good performance or a terrible performance.
It's a good one.
There's something about the director's cut that just makes it unquestionably a great performance.
There's just more given to it. I mean, his scene on the bed in particular, with the bed full of money, the scene is more or less intact for in the theatrical cut, but it's just everything is given more space to breathe, and there is specifically the order of the things that they say. There's a specific point where at first they've kind of talked about there's no more labels anymore, or we can explore who we truly are, and then Breckin Meyer says, "I'm not gay," and then Steve Rubell replies, "I'm not gay either. Beat. I want to suck your cock." And it's the scene was powerful before. It's so much better. You get a much better sense of how he conceptualizes himself, the story he tells himself about who he is.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, and, I was just thinking how maybe it's not ironic, but how well, okay, before I get to that, what I like about this director's cut is the theatrical cut makes Steve Rubell out to be the villain of the movie. This is he's not a good guy, and nothing really has changed about him, but he's just kind of part of the palette of this movie. He
kind of just is the club, yeah.
Yeah, he's not the central antagonist, and that makes me look at his character in a different way. It's not as problematic as we talked about last week, how it vilifies that sort of behavior. What I find kind of ironic is how in 2024, when we're covering this movie, there is a kind of sense of the ironic thing is labels have become so important.
Yes.
But the sentiment of labels are important for being able to understand yourself.
Yeah.
And ultimately by having so many labels, they kind of don't matter. It's labels are important only so far as how you understand yourself.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what he's saying here, but for a completely insidious reason.
Yes.
Which is labels don't matter is what I'm telling you to feel fine about letting me go through with this act that is manipulative and abusing power.
Inappropriate.
So I just found that kind of interesting.
That's a good point, and this next thing I'm going to say I don't think really builds off of it or honors the good analysis that you did, but watching this and once again enjoying Mike Myers' performance, it sort of occurred to me that I could tell someone, hey, I'm going to go watch a Mike Myers movie from 1997 in which he hangs out in a nightclub full of people in period costumes doing synchronized dances, and you'd think that I was going to be watching a different Mike Myers movie than this one, but, he just had a thing he was doing at that point in time.
This is completely aside the point, but Mark Christopher has mentioned that Cabaret, the movie Cabaret, was a big influence on this movie, and that's why he cast Michael York. However, at no point does anyone mention the fact that he says, just like the swingin' 60s at one point in this movie, and I'm like, come on, that's gotta be an Austin Powers reference.
Yeah. I mean, now to be fair, Mike Myers doesn't say just like swinging London, but still, yes, it's
All right, what else do we want to cover for this?
I think wait, hang on. I
most of my stuff. Go ahead.
I have nothing else except for this very pressing question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Steve Rubell would let Austin Powers into Studio 54?
Absolutely. I mean, what was the club in the first Austin Powers movie? It was almost like a proto Studio 54.
I mean, yes, it is literally the club in Austin Powers is literally the club that Michael York is talking about in this movie when he says that the clubs in swinging London were better. We're having a wonderful time there until Austin Powers got cryogenically frozen and then the party died. I mean, I feel like I would hope that Steve Rubell would let Austin Powers into the club because he's undoubtedly a great addition to the dance floor milieu. I mean, he's going to make everybody's night. He is truly the nightclub wizard. I just don't know if he's good looking enough to rise to that level. I mean, there are the people that need to be beautiful to be let in, yes, but I think more importantly, it's what is going to make other people desire to get in. And Austin Powers specifically in the 60s, I think, is the type of person you would want in your club. I mean, he's basically the equivalent of an Andy Warhol or, those interesting characters. Mike Myers, Austin Powers in 1997, maybe not. Yeah, but
maybe also maybe it's passe enough that you want him in there.
Well, yeah. I mean, we saw how Austin Powers was received in 1997. Huge hit. They made 2 more movies. It blew up completely. Also, it doesn't matter how Austin Powers would be received in 1997 because Studio 54 was popping in 1979. So I guess it really is a question of how would Austin Powers be received in the 70s, and to find that out, we'd have to watch Goldmember, starring Beyonce.
Here's the answer, I think. In 1979, Austin Powers is frozen. So I think the way he gets in is he becomes part of the set decoration. You roll in the frozen tank of Austin Powers to hang out in the background, and you do some sort of ice-themed cabaret number around it.
It's literally like Jabba's palace, where he's got Han Solo frozen, and everyone's just dancing around him. So Mike Myers as Steve Rubell hosting a party where Mike Myers as Austin Powers is frozen. That's the party of the century, far as I'm concerned. That is the bar called heaven. Take that, David Byrne.
All right, what do you say we beam up our guest for this episode? I'm very excited to be talking to Louis Jordan, who wrote the article about Studio 54, the director's cut, when it was first released. Hit the button. All right, everyone. Welcome, Louis Jordan, writer, podcaster, and all-around film lover. Louis is here today because he wrote the definitive article on the emergence of the director's cut of 54. This article originally appeared in Vulture, but went on to appear on Slate, The New York Magazine, IndieWire, many places. Louis, hello. How are you?
Hi. I'm doing great. That was probably my most read article back when I was doing journalism. Now I work as an archivist, but still with sort of music and film and things like that. But before I wrote about film, and the 54 one really took off in a way that none of my other articles had. I'm still proud of that one.
Well, yeah, we reached out 10 years after the fact, so I mean, it still has some legs, and I'm excited because I think that is proof that this film, the director's cut, is still being discovered, and I'm very curious to get into the story of what this whole deal was with you.
Yeah,
not with you. Get into it with you.
It sounds
about
accusatory.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really started with me going through like a serious disco phase. Okay. And I was just listening to a lot of disco. I was getting really into, like, let me find this obscure whatever. And then while reading about some kind of disco thing, I don't remember how, but I saw a copy of the kissing scene from 54 between Breckin, Meyer, and Ryan Phillippe. And then I was like, oh my God, what is this thing? And because I had seen 54, I think, on cable or something like that. And I mean, when I was younger, I was like, I had a crush on Ryan Phillippe from Cruel Intentions.
Naturally.
There's that famous scene where he...
I know the era well.
Yeah, there's that famous scene where he shows his butt and everything like that, and that was like a big deal for me. But I was like, what is this? This like, so I started looking around online, and I found this work print of the film. On some like shady film site, and it was so muddy and degraded from being dubbed over and over from VHS to VHS.
A digitized version of the VHS bootleg, the mythological artifact that was going around from the inception of the film.
Yes. It wasn't just a director's cut. It was like a work print. It was even longer than the director's cut.
Okay.
And it was so muddy that it was almost unwatchable. But even in that state, I was like, this is so good. This is really good. This has nothing to do with that other movie that I remember seeing on TBS.
Which I have to imagine was edited even further from
oh my God, I can imagine.
Theatrical release.
A copy of a copy at that point. Just
And so then I found Peter Biskin's book on Miramax called Down and Dirty Pictures, and Biskin dishes so much dirt in that book, and
there's a lot of dirt to be dished,
and he told all about the whole story about Weinstein taking the film away from Mark Christopher and cutting all of the gay out of it, basically. And so I knew that there was an interesting story there, and I also knew that there was this sort of injustice committed by this horrible person. And so then I looking into Mark Christopher, and it happened to on the website for the college that he was teaching at in Pennsylvania, they said, next year a director's cut of 54 is coming out. And I was like, what? I haven't heard anything about this. So I had some mutual friends with Mark, so I messaged him on Facebook, and he was like, yeah, that's happening, but it's not supposed to be public information yet. They weren't supposed to say that. So I would appreciate if you didn't say anything. And I was like, okay, I won't. But I want to pitch this story to places. I want to, And so in advance of this thing being, because I knew, as soon as it came out that other people would start pitching the story. So I got the jump on everybody else and started pitching it. And so by the time that the news was announced that it was premiering at the Berlin Film Festival, I had already, been pitching it to New York Magazine. So
you just caught it at like the right exact moment, it feels like.
Yeah, it was just, me being a weird internet obsessive, and then, suddenly finding it at just the right moment. And so then I thought, oh, this will be so great. I'll be able to, tell this really dishy story. It'll be so much fun. I did not realize what was in store for me. Because everyone was afraid of Harvey Weinstein. They were terrified of him. This was 2 years before all of the allegations came out, before Rose McGowan and Asia Argento and
this is 2015, right?
Yeah, and it was 2017 when he, just got completely disgraced and canceled. And so he still had a huge amount of power. And so everyone was terrified. I interviewed Mark Christopher, who's great. I really got along with him well, but I could tell during our interview he was being so careful not to say anything because Weinstein was allowing him to put out this director's cut, and he did not want to do anything. This was sort of his big chance to be redeemed as a filmmaker. He didn't want to ruin that by ruffling any feathers.
He makes an interesting comment in one of the featurettes on the director's cut Blu-ray of getting the opportunity to do this director's cut, and he does seem very like towing the line isn't the right term, but like tiptoeing very carefully. But he does very slyly say, if I do reapproach this movie again in the future, I think he's talking in regards to letting Salma Hayek record her own song. But he kind of sneaks in a, who knows what the future holds, and if I get the opportunity again, there's still more out there that we can do to this movie.
Yeah, exactly. And so he was very interested in telling the story about how they put the director's cut together, but why that was required, he didn't want to talk about so much. It was also, I imagine, an extremely traumatic experience for him.
I can't imagine.
I would imagine that to make something that is so personal to him, that he's invested so much in, and then to have it so publicly put out there with his name on it, but is something that is so just not a piece of art anymore, something that is just this weird assemblage, must have been very personally hurtful for him.
And as your first film.
Yes, well, and what happened, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of some of this, but he did a short film called The Dead Boys Club, which is about this young man in the 90s who finds this pair of shoes that are sort of like infused with the spirit of this gay man who had died of AIDS, and he keeps hearing like disco songs when he puts these shoes on and stuff like that, and this was a really acclaimed short, and people were saying, okay, he's a new director of this whole new queer cinema movement, which is like Gus Van Sant and people like that, and so he was considered to be very promising, and 54 was sort of his follow-up to that short film, but he was supposed to be establishing himself as a real voice of the new queer cinema movement, and instead he ended up just not working in Hollywood again.
Can I pause right there and just kind of dig into that, because I find it fascinating when I look at the other films that Miramax was putting out at the time, because the same year they released Velvet Goldmine by Todd Haynes, and they're also like, I know was it Focus that did Boogie Nights the year before?
Yes.
New Line.
And obviously they do Tarantino films. What was it about 54 that like really got under their skin and made them want to make all those changes?
Well, it was, at first they were fine with it, because this was a movie with an unknown actor as the lead. Nobody knew who Ryan Phillippe was. And Mike Myers was just coming off of Austin Powers, and that was basically what got the movie greenlit. But it was a low-budget movie being shot in Canada, and it wasn't supposed to have so much pressure on it. And then what happened was, after the shoot, which was, you know, really great and creative and lovely, and everybody had wonderful memories of it, then I Know What You Did Last Summer came out.
Right.
And Ryan Phillippe got really famous really fast, and Miramax, you know, Harvey in particular, Harvey thought, oh, wow, I've got this movie starring the new hot teen heartthrob. I can make this a big summer movie. I can make this like Saturday Night Fever. And then he sent it to be for a test screening in a Long Island mall with a bunch of teenagers who were like, what's going on? These guys are kissing. These characters are so unlikable. They're doing terrible things to each other. I don't like this movie. And so he thought, instead of letting it be the movie that it was, he wanted to turn it into a different movie that he thought would be able to make money now that that Ryan Phillippe was somebody.
So I can see the economics of that, where you have a what was it, $14 million, $15 million budget, not including marketing, that suddenly you have one of the biggest upcoming stars in the world. Imagine the profits you can get from that. Because one of the big questions that has been kind of bouncing around my head is, you know, at that point in his career, he'd been, you know, doing distribution for 20, 30 years. Why focus group it somewhere where it's almost destined to get negative reviews?
Well, this is the thing about Harvey Weinstein, is that in some ways, and it's so nice to be able to say insulting things about Harvey Weinstein publicly now without fear of lawsuits.
It's been building up for so long.
You know, he's in jail. What's he going to do?
Make his own podcast, I guess.
Yeah. But he is in some ways a frustrated director. And he took so many movies away from so many filmmakers and recut them. And sometimes it worked out, but I mean, there are films by Jim Jarmusch, by Martin Scorsese, Guillermo del Toro, M. Night Shyamalan, Merchant Ivory, Billy Bob Thornton, all movies that he just took them and hacked them to bits, and they disappeared and you know, were failed, and he said, oh well, it was a piece of crap anyway. But his nickname, he had a nickname in the industry, Harvey Scissorhands. Because he liked to cut films. And so that was I think that had something to do with it. And you know, I don't think that he was I mean, he knew what was in the script when he bought it, but maybe just seeing the stuff up there on screen, he was like, this isn't commercial. You know,
right?
And those movies that you mentioned, like Velvet Goldmine, that bombed. I mean, I love that movie, but that bombed, and I'm sure that he wasn't, you know, looking for another Velvet Goldmine.
I mean, do you think that to some extent Weinstein was looking for his own version of Boogie Nights? I mean, do you think that he was influenced by, like, just trying to chop this movie, which had some thematic similarities, and turn it into Boogie Nights?
Well, maybe. But he also, I think a lot of the cuts, and it wasn't just cuts, that's the thing.
Right.
What happened was he took the film away from Mark Christopher. He handed it to his own team of editors and also a team of writers who wrote a new voiceover. for it. And then he
Did they write the new like Neve Campbell scenes too?
Yes, and they wrote the new scenes, and then he forced Mark Christopher to be, because of his contract and everything, to shoot these new scenes about 2 months before the film was supposed to come out. That created this romance between Ryan Phillippe's character and Neve Campbell's character that was not there at all.
Yeah,
and
that bowling scene is unbearable.
and also from this is unconfirmed, but from what from Peter Biskin's book, he says that Weinstein forced Neve Campbell on Mark Christopher because she'd just been in Scream, which was released through Dimension, which is like an arm of Miramax, and that was a big hit. And so he was like, you need to put Neve in this, write a part for her. And so they wrote a little part for her. But he was like, oh, now I can have a romance between Ryan Phillippe and Neve Campbell. This is going to be big box office. And the rewriting all seemed to be focused on taking out the moral ambiguities and making Ryan Phillippe's character sympathetic, and taking anything bad that he did and assigning it to other characters, like Breckin Meyer's character. He becomes the drug dealer, and he becomes the guy who stole the money, and all of these, and so I think rather than trying to turn it into Boogie Nights, he was trying to turn it into a big blockbuster movie that could play at malls and would be a hit with teenagers.
We talked a little bit about this in our full coverage of the film, where there's maybe it's just me, but there's a certain sense of wanting to lay this at the feet of a monster in all its forms, but I think the more like what he did was monstrous to this film, but some of it I'm not sure was totally intentional. It's just a byproduct of what he did to it. What I was shocked at in the theatrical cut was by removing all of the self-discovery and the sexual ambiguity of everything, it put all of that on Mike Myers, and as the villain, it kind of created this gross, vilified version of sexuality as depravity, and did the original material, I think, the most disservice.
Yeah. Well, and also because that was such a good performance by Mike Myers that I think got turned into more of this kind of grotesque, kind of evil, pervy gay who's gonna try to do bad, nasty things to you, which in the director's cut he's still horrible, but he's more of a well-rounded person, and the full performance really comes through. And
the tapestry of the rest of the film kind of helps envelop that and show alternate versions of positive versions of that, or just kind of general life experience where it doesn't put that entire representation on that character.
Yes, the theatrical version of the film is about a nice boy from New Jersey who goes to this weird, gay, depraved, druggy place and learns that all of this is empty and bad, and you shouldn't be around it.
Shame.
It's just that
shame on you.
One sequence from the middle of Babylon where they meet Tobey Maguire and go into the pits of hell.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas in the director's cut, you can see how his father thinks that he's not going to amount to something. You can see that he really wants to prove himself, that he wants to become somebody, and he's so beautiful, so people want to have sex with him. But then he mistakes that for, maybe I can really become somebody, I am somebody, and he doesn't realize he's having fun, and he's coming into himself and sort of some of his sexual power, but he doesn't realize how disposable he is. And it, as a longtime New Yorker, I have seen that happen so many times. I've seen people come on the scene, and they're going to take over the city. Look out, New York. And, they change their name to Johnny Disco, and they're going to be the biggest thing ever. And maybe they are for a couple of months. And then you're like, oh, what happened to that person? Oh, I don't see him around anymore. Oh, I think he moved back home and went to rehab, And it's that sort of thing. But I think at the end, he realizes what's important is, his friends, or even they're not even necessarily his friends. It's almost like a throuple by the end.
Yeah,
right.
But it's like the people that he loves, the people that genuinely care about him, not the people that just want to have sex with him, are the important thing.
I think one of the more shocking things, it was 3 lines in a scene between Ryan Phillippe and Breckin Meyer that was missing from the theatrical cut and answered a question, because in the theatrical cut there's just a complete lack of understanding as to what it is that Ryan Phillippe wants, what he's striving for, even in his self-discovery. And in the director's cut, there's just these 3 lines that says something to the extent of like, I'm so close I can almost touch it. What can you touch? Everything. And in that moment you get a sense of Ryan Phillippe thinking he's about to get this greatness, but how empty that also is. And it informs that character so much.
Yeah,
because even though I didn't know that was missing, I felt it in the theatrical cut.
Yeah, because when you're from some place like Jersey, or I'm from Indiana, and you don't know how things work. You're around these rich people, you're around these famous people, so you're going to be one of these famous people, right? It stands to reason, and yet none of those people in the main cast, Salma Hayek or Breckin Meyer, none of them really have that. Even Salma Hayek, she's not really portrayed as being an incredibly talented artist. Right. Even she's like, oh, I'm not really that great, but she's beautiful. And so it's, he just doesn't understand how things work. And the system, the way that kind of system runs on people like that, young, beautiful people who, don't understand that they're a cog in a machine.
I want to ask you, this movie, or our podcast here, is about why movies were forgotten. And I guess just taking in context, what is your perspective of like why, because of all of these things, the changes that were made, what do you think's missing from it that made people not care and like just decide to, go, okay, that was a movie and we can move on with our lives within 3 weeks, of it being in the theaters?
Well, the theatrical cut is corny. I mean, it's like a classic. I go to the big city and discover how empty showbiz is. I mean, they've been making these movies since silent film. This is an old trope, and the characters were just flattened out, and it didn't reflect the era properly. The reviews of the theatrical cut were saying, well, it got the look right, but it doesn't feel like New York in the 70s. It doesn't feel like Studio 54. It doesn't feel like the disco era. And I think that the director's cut captures that sort of those seductive elements and that moral ambiguity that was inherent to that scene. And so it really feels like it's representing that time, whereas the theatrical cut feels like a Disney-fied version of that. And you just kind of go, ugh, yeah, that is the kind of movie that Hollywood would make about Studio 54. Blech.
I don't know why it didn't come up in our conversation, Truman, but we didn't ever comment on the look of this film, which I think is beautiful. Alexander Grzinski is the director of photography on it, and he does just capture the vibe. Like even after watching the theatrical cut for the first time and not really liking it, I found myself like kind of still digging the vibe of it as kind of like a party movie, a wallpaper movie that I would put on.
It's
I
fun.
think it came down.
It's fun watching. Like, it looks fun. You're not looking at people having a good time and feeling removed from it. Like, even in its most chopped up form, in those moments in the club, you kind of feel like you're a part of the party.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Lewis, I was going to say, I was listening to an episode of your podcast, Mother Murderer Podcaster. I was listening to the episode The Midnight Hour, and in that episode you talked a lot about nostalgia and what nostalgia is. It specifically kind of like hooking into a place that people want to escape to. And I'm wondering if like the look of this film, the general vibes, what is it that you think the people that carried the torch for this, that found the VHS and passed that bootleg around, what is it in the theatrical cut that you think they saw that they wanted to make sure that this film stayed alive?
First, I'm thank you for mentioning my podcast and giving it a plug. That's my podcast about TV movies that I make with my friend Katie Madonna-Lee. It's a Mother Murderer Podcaster, and please check it out on Spotify or wherever. But I think that the movie that 54 was made with a sense of the movie was coming out of the 90s where AIDS was just ravaging the gay community, and this is about a pre-AIDS time when it was this big party, but the party was sort of coming to an end, and right around when it came to an end was just before AIDS hit. And so I think that there was a sense of, looking back at that time, which seemed so far away then, even though it wasn't, because that, since after AIDS hit, you just couldn't, you couldn't live like that anymore. And then I think that, that the movie, there's never really been like a great disco movie other than, there's Saturday Night Fever, that's about like a little disco in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And there's not as much of it set in the disco as you remember.
Yeah, I know. It's like the disco in that is like an escape from the heavy issues that movie deals with.
Yeah, I was rewatching it and I was like, wow, there's a lot of rapes in this movie for one that's
Yes.
I didn't then I think that then there's movies like Thank God It's Friday or whatever, it's just a lot of disco movies where these sort of campy light movies that had great soundtracks but didn't resonate very much, and I think that the director's cut of this was a genuinely great movie made about Studio 54 and the disco era that really captured it, and that just didn't really exist. And so I think that when it came out and it was bad, the people who were interested in that were disappointed that it was bad, and and everybody else was sort of like, what? But
so you kind of hold on to that. Like if there's no other examples, it's like, well, this is the thing we have, good, bad, or other. We have to, embrace this until the next thing comes around. Yeah. So, do you think there's a sense of that there?
I think that the backstory has something to do with it also, and the drama of it. I think that, and also just like there's a certain percentage of the population that would really like to watch Ryan Phillippe and Breckin Meyer make out. I know that I belong to that percentage of the population. I was wondering though, with my whole story of writing this article, I wanted to go back a little bit to that because I thought it was kind of interesting how that played out, and it kind of showed, I don't know, I guess how things worked with Harvey Weinstein, because as I was saying before, everybody was afraid of Harvey, and I couldn't get, and Mark Christopher was, very careful when he talked to me, but I couldn't get anybody else to talk to me. I contacted so many people from the crew, from the cast. Nobody wanted to talk to me. And then on top of that, I was getting calls from the Weinstein Company over and over again, like at all hours of the night.
Really?
I couldn't believe how many times they called me. And after a while, I just stopped answering. And they kept telling me, okay, you're allowed to write this. You're not allowed to write this. You can't talk about this. You can't talk about that. They were like, don't call him Harvey Scissorhands. He doesn't like being called Harvey Scissorhands. I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, well, I wasn't going to, but now that you mention it.
This is like some William Randolph Hearst bullshit.
Yeah, and
are these like assistants calling you, or like how high up at the company is this?
I wasn't really sure. I don't remember exactly. I mean, it certainly wasn't Harvey or Harvey's assistant,
Sure.
but it really moved up when I had to contact the Weinstein Company to get a quote from Harvey Weinstein, to balance the piece out and to have something, a chance for him to respond. And after I got that quote, then the Weinstein Company just crawled up my ass and would not leave. And they weren't just telling me, you can't say this. They were saying, if you write something libelous, we will sue you. We will sue New York Magazine. We will make sure that you never write anything again. We will destroy you. And like a movie, really.
Jeez.
And
Yeah.
so, and then I'm going around trying desperately to get somebody to talk to me. Nobody will talk to me. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this story fell into my lap. Am I going to have to give this up? Then Ryan Phillippe got back to me, and he said, I'll talk to you. And I found out later that there was quite a lot of hubbub about this behind the scenes, and talking with PR people and people saying, I don't know if you should, but Ryan Phillippe really believed that an injustice had been done, and he really thought it was really messed up what Harvey had done, and he was not afraid to say it. And so he got on the phone with me, and he was so much smarter and perceptive than you would ever think from his like himbo persona. Very like thoughtful, measured, and he just told me exactly what happened. He told me stuff that I did not think that he was going to tell me. And that was what opened the gate, because once he spoke to me and was very frank, then other people on the production, I heard about it, and then they started to talk to me, and they wouldn't necessarily all go on record, but they corroborated things that I'd heard in other places and allowed me to put those in, so I could get 3 sources for something. And, they can't say that it's libel if I have 3 people saying this happened.
Right.
And so that let me, and then he called up Breckin Meyer and said, hey, you should talk to this guy because they're buddies. They're like best friends.
Yeah.
And so that enabled all of that to happen. And I was able to write this piece, purely because Ryan Phillippe had the balls to say, fuck you, Harvey Weinstein. And so I will always have a soft spot in my heart for Ryan Phillippe, not just because of his fantastic butt in Cruel Intentions, but also because of his chutzpah for doing that. Yeah,
that takes a lot of balls and integrity to do that, to tell the story officially. I'm glad that he did that. I mean, because it's curious, as you mentioned in your article, that a movie like this gets a director's cut in the first place, but just that this movie has such a story behind the director's cut, that in itself needs to be told. And I'm glad that you were able to do that with his help, with the entire crew of people that you've had to interview for this. I think it is a very eye-opening experience when you realize when you compare the two movies and see how much the intention of something can change. I mean, this is really kind of a film school in a box, to turn a tragedy into something somewhat useful. And
also, I mean, the cuts that are happening in it, it's not just scenes that are cut and rewritten, but if you look, the performances and the scenes, especially Ryan Phillippe's performance, suffers from this. The scenes are just chopped, where like a second is gone here, a second's gone there. Everything is just moving so quickly. Nobody's character has time to breathe or feel like a human being. And you don't realize how much that can affect something, just missing a couple of seconds here and there, and that can make or break a performance.
This is something that I really noticed, is the theatrical cut is downright confusing, even with a voiceover explaining everything in thuddingly obvious terms, because you just can't tell who is where or when because of how choppy it is.
Yeah, it's just they were trying to speed it up and make it. They were trying to make it something that it was not. They were trying to take an apple and make it an orange, and you just can't do that. And then, as a sort of a capper on all of this stuff, with the article, after it came out and it was sort of shared and reblogged and all of that stuff, then Mark Christopher reached out to me and said that out of all of the accounts that he'd read of the making of 54, I was the one who got it right. And he said, I'm coming to New York soon. I'd like to take you out for a drink. And I said, that's awesome. Let's set it up. And so we met for a drink, and he said, okay, here's all the stuff that I couldn't tell you in that interview. And
Amazing.
He just started telling me horror stories that I would have loved to have put in that article. I think another thing that I hadn't said, and that I don't think that I mentioned in the article, is that rewatching it now, because I rewatched it before this, I was thinking to myself, oh, this is so clearly inspired by Cabaret. By the film Cabaret, with the love triangle that sort of becomes a three-way relationship, and
Michael York.
Michael York, and the sort of, that's definitely a nod to that, and the just sort of sexual ambiguity and moral ambiguity of it. But yeah, I feel like this movie, it has something unique about it that is fun but also moving, especially the last half hour of the movie really kind of hits home. And as somebody who, I don't go out that much anymore, but in my 20s I was definitely like going on tables and stuff like that. And I was like, yes, and yes, this is all true. This all rings true and accurate to me. And it was so wonderful to see the emotional side of that kind of scene shown, where it's not just, oh, look at all of this fabulousness, but it's also what happens emotionally with the people in that scene, and what happens when the scene dies.
And sort of on that note, I mean, are there specific sequences or like scenes or moments in the director's cut that really like just have stuck out for you, or that kind of live rent free in your head? Aside, of course, from the Breckin Meyer Ryan Phillippe kiss, which obviously is number one.
I mean, there's things like, this one was in both versions, but the scene with Mike Myers trying to seduce Breckin Meyer while looted out on a bed full of cash. That's such the interplay between the two of them is so good in that. The death.
Such a relatable scene too, because I feel like despite the specifics that are happening there, I felt like, oh my god, any person that has found themselves in a situation with someone else and just suddenly has that uh-oh moment, like can relate to that scene, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember just this time watching that scene and going, oh god, that's such a good scene. And then there's other scenes like, I mean, the death of Disco Dottie really hits so much harder in the director's cut, because you really see her and get to know her, and you're like, oh, she's a grandma, her name's Mona, and you see her like Shane, Ryan's character, is having a bad trip, and she does this wonderful thing where she just says, give me your hands, and she takes his hands and looks at him and sort of guides him to look at her, and then that grounds him enough that he's kind of okay. And I'm like, that's exactly a thing that would happen. That was not like a Hollywoodized version of that moment. And
I think that's the only Dottie thing that wasn't in the theatrical cut, but that made her final moments, which happened very shortly after that moment, all the more impactful.
Yes, exactly. It for some reason in the theatrical cut it feels manipulative, and in the director's cut it just feels like and then and suddenly the lights come on, and there's this harsh lighting, and then you just see this old woman's dead body on the ground that he's kneeling over it, and it just changes how everything in the scene looks. There's so many really great moments like that, and even the Neve Campbell, who would not win any acting awards for the reshoots that she did in the theatrical version. In the director's cut, she's got a lovely little scene with Ryan Phillippe in a coffee shop in Jersey, where they just sort of bond over, he's like, oh, you're from Jersey too, but it's done in a really sweet way. And then she has this kind of double-edged thing that she says to him at the end, where she's like, I never would have thought. And he's like, what? And she's like, that you'd be so sweet. And it's like, that's a sweet thing, but also he's like, oh, people think I'm an asshole. And so there's so many little moments like that, things that ring true or that resonate on multiple levels that just make it a much more realistic and full-bodied experience.
Fantastic. Well, I want to make sure that we give you time to promote and plug everything you want to plug. Lewis, I want to thank you so much for being here and telling your part in this story that I fingers crossed is ongoing, only for the positive. So I want to just give another promotion for Mother Murderer Podcaster, a great podcast about TV movies. I, again, would highly recommend the Midnight Hour. Personally, I'm a big horror fan, as everyone knows. But Lewis, you want to talk a little bit about your show and other places people can find you?
Sure. I think during the COVID lockdown, my friend Katie Madonna-Lee, who's a film director, who's directed several films, and I became kind of obsessed with watching TV movies on YouTube. And then we thought, it's not just that these are campy, silly, fun movies, but also these ones, especially that we were focusing on ones from the 80s and 90s, we thought these say so much about the time that they were made in, what people were thinking and feeling and what they were afraid of at that time. And also, it's really talking about like women's lives and their experiences in a way that theatrical movies were not doing at that time and still don't even do very much, and taking things seriously and talking about issues. And I was like, oh, these movies that everybody makes fun of are actually like very important and introduced a lot of people to a lot of important topics. And so if we could do a podcast where we can laugh and scream about, campy TV movies and, oh my God, can you believe that moment? But then also say, but let's look at this a little bit deeper and let's see what was going on behind this and what is this really saying? And that made us want to make it. And so, and we've been making it for, over a year now, and it's kind of learned on the job, and it's a lot of fun to make.
Yeah, I would also, since this 54 is coming on the heels of our Legend of Tarzan episode, also point people to the episode right before the Midnight Hour, Tarzan in Manhattan, which is such a bizarre film, especially if you are aware of Gwen Shandling and the cult issues. Her husband plays Tarzan.
Yes, we saw it and we were like, oh, what is this, Tarzan in Manhattan? That sounds silly. And then we were Googling, looking around on IMDb, and then it was like, that's Gwen Shamlin's husband? Oh my God, we have to cover this. So there's a lot of things like that we find where it's like,
Do we think that Tarzan could get into Studio 54? What's your take on that?
Oh my God, yes. Are you kidding? He has every single requirement, I mean, he's
True.
He doesn't even in 54 they have the scene where he tells Ryan Phillippe, oh, not in that shirt. And he thinks he's telling him to go away, and he says, no, not in that shirt. And then
great scene.
He gets it and takes off his shirt and goes in. And, Tarzan wouldn't even have to do that. He's going in a loincloth. That's perfect. What a look.
True.
Louis, where else can people find you on the internet?
I mean, I'm around. I'm on Instagram at Louis Jordan 8. I'm not really writing that much anymore. I now work as an archivist. I work with people in film or in music, who've had careers and accumulated a lot of things over that time, and kind of organize their archive and help them, place it somewhere, whether it's with a collector or at a university or something like that. And so that has allowed me to keep doing kind of my favorite part of journalism, which was always the research. And and also making sure that that things that are historically important stay preserved, and that they're not going to get like thrown into the dumpster by some landlord who doesn't know what the hell it is.
Yeah,
and so
deeply important work. I know that Scorsese's Last Waltz with the band was initially intended just for archive material of their last performance, and it turned into a whole film. So, yeah. Just to goes to show the effort that should go into archiving important stuff. So,
I guess that about covers it.
Fantastic. Louis, thank you so much. You have an open invitation to come back to the machine whenever you want to.
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate you being here today and illuminating the saga of 54. Thank you so much.
And thank you
Louis.
so much for tracking me down and inviting me on and, giving me a chance to talk about this movie, which I love, and the whole experience of writing about it, and finally getting to air my grievances with Harvey Weinstein, which admittedly are minor grievances compared to some other people's, but I'm glad that I got to air them.
I'm glad that we gave you the space to do so. We will post the article so people can read this wonderful supplemental material to both the theatrical and director's cut of this movie. And Lewis, we hope to see you again.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. I want to thank once again Lewis Jordan for being here to talk about his article and his experience with 54. Thank you so much for being here. That was very illuminating. And I think we all
much appreciated.
Learned quite a bit. Let's start to end this episode. Why don't we go into our trailer game for 54? Woo! Woo! We're gonna watch.
People love it.
We're gonna watch the theatrical trailer for 54, and together we're going to try and choose a couple of moments that we think are going to appear in the trailer, and then we'll tally up our score at the end. So. Together, we're going to come up with 5 points we think will be in the trailer, and then we'll watch it together and see how we did. So, Truman, I'll give you first blood. What do you think is going to be in the trailer?
Well, look, I think that if you're trying to give people an encapsulation of what this movie is, what 54 is, and what kind of stuff is going to go in this movie, regardless of which cut you're watching, it's got to be Ryan Phillippe on the street and Mike Myers telling him, "No, you can't get in, not with that shirt." And then, sorry, man. It's
my one.
I mean, it's a wonderful setup.
Walk through the scene one more time, just so that we know what to look for here.
Ryan Phillippe outside the bar trying to get in. Mike
for
Myers,
the first time.
Steve Rubell. Yeah, for the first time. Steve Rubell stops him and says, No, not with that shirt. And he starts to turn around and he goes, No, you can't get in wearing that shirt. And then he takes the shirt off. Everyone is hooting, and Steve Rubell smiles and beckons him inside.
That was my fucking one moment. Damn it, you stole that from me. But we're working together. We're working together.
We're working together. And just on every level, if you're trying to market the movie that you paid Ryan Phillippe to be in, I mean, you should have him with his shirt off in the trailer, guys. I mean, come on, that's advertising 101.
Well, okay, on that note, though, I think because of what we saw in the theatrical cut and how they elevated Neve Campbell, I think there's going to be some marketing material using her. What do you, and maybe we can work together on this real quick. I was trying to think of her in the club. Like, there's just that very brief exchange where he's like, "Hi, I'm Shane," and she's like, "Hi, I'm Julie," and then they walk away. I don't think it's going to be quite that because it doesn't linger enough. Do you think there's something in the hotel?
Or it's them bowling. No, I think it's actually
not
them
bowling.
No, it's them outside. It's them outside the hotel by the car, and her saying something like, "I didn't know you were so sweet," or something like that. Because it's going to be
when she rolls down the window in the limo.
I don't know. It's some stupid bullshit about like, "Hey, I want to be with you and you alone forever. Let's get married in a white picket fence church and have 2.5 children," or something like that. I don't think any of that is usable.
The imagery of her showing up in a limo and rolling it down, that's a trailer thing, but what she says isn't. Yeah, okay.
I mean, there's going to be, maybe it's her pulling up in the limo, window rolling down, and it's voiceover of him going like, "Oh, Julie, what's her face? She's from all of my children. She's the most beautiful girl in the world." You want that?
That's not a bad... Yeah, okay, I like that.
That's not a bad impression. I can do anybody. I can do Ryan Phillippe in 54.
Okay, then I'm going to go with this. This is kind of an outside choice, I recognize, but because this movie was cut to hell, I'm wondering if there's going to be an alternate line in here. And, which happens sometimes when you deal with movies with big adult content. I'm going to... you can mark me down for this 1 point solo. So if we're wrong, it's on me.
Great.
Salma Hayek, Breckin Meyer in the closet, and Breckin Meyer says, I can't get ahead. He's lamenting that he just can't progress in this club and where he wants to get the bartender job because he says, "I'm short and I don't suck cock." And Salma Hayek says, "Well, you can't do anything about being short," which is kind of a great line. I love that little exchange.
No. Solid line.
I think that exchange will be there, but we'll have like a TV version of I Don't Suck Cock.
Yeah, but what's the TV version of I Don't Suck Cock? I don't find a stranger in the Alps. Like I don't I don't tuck sock. Is that what it is?
Maybe something like that.
I don't chuck clock. He wants me to throw a clock around. I'm not going to do that. That's immoral and wrong. I'm a married man.
I'm not smart enough to know what the alternate line is. I'm just going to call that there is an alternate line.
All right. You know what, man? Good luck with that one.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's a long shot, but where that brings us to 3, is that? Do you have another one?
Yeah, that's up to 3. Yeah, I got another one.
Okay.
I think we're gonna get the sassy dude at the party telling him he's the most handsome troglodyte he's ever met. I think that's gonna I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a real question. It's an open question for me of how hard this trailer is going to be just trying to sell this as, hey, look, it's Boogie Nights vibes. Like, it might all just be nightclubs, cocaine, and pretty girls, and there might not be any hint at, like, oh yeah, and this guy feels bad about himself sometimes. I don't know. So
okay.
that's a risk for me.
I've got one that just came to me while you were talking there that I'm almost certain will be there.
Great.
Truman Capote, where's Truman Capote?
I never miss up a chance to have a video call my name to me. Yeah, I mean, I guess that does establish for an audience that maybe doesn't know what Studio 54 is.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I'm gonna go with as my second choice.
All right. Do we want to then roll on this? See where we get to?
Yeah, let's roll on it.
Okay, here we go. Okay, royalty-free disco.
Here's the VO. Steve Rubell, front and center.
A lot of parties. A lot of beautiful ladies. Oh, Dottie.
He comped the designers, the photographers, and the record people, and the models, actors, and rock stars.
There's Neve Campbell. Hi, Andy, not Truman.
Steve controlled the door. Right over there.
Wait.
It didn't matter if you were a plumber or a supermodel.
Oh, Trump, no!
Oh, no! Oh, he's in the trailer. Gross.
But not with that shirt. Boom.
If you looked hot enough.
You got it.
3 cuts of him taking his shirt off.
Welcome to the
Use
party,
every
handsome.
part of the pig but the squeal.
Welcome to the party, handsome is like a tagline for this movie.
Really good. Oh, Truman Capote, though, getting
the line wasn't there. Is a half point, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Wow, the end credits, Neve Campbell.
That I wouldn't have called.
No. They're really just loading up on Neve.
I'm gonna be Shane 54. Man, I should have called that one.
I should have guessed hello, friend.
It's a great moment. I didn't expect that to be in the trailer.
No, but yeah, that was it. You got.
There's the limo.
Oh.
Is that it?
That's,
they color coded it. That's supposed to take place in the daylight, and they made it look like it was night.
So chopped up.
All 4 of us wanted something so badly.
Palace of Wisdom.
That we'd do
Oh,
anything together.
Oh, you almost saw Ryan Phillippe.
They're not gonna put the Phillippes in here.
Ryan Phillippe.
No, but you almost did.
Neve Campbell and Mike Myers.
Wait, so
if you watch this trailer, you would go into this thinking, I'm about to go see Ryan's Phillippes. They're going to show me them in this one.
And they do.
They do. Oh, this is a great line, too. That's a great
yeah, okay.
moment.
So this is great. This is just really really special. So that completely is just like, hey, Studio 54, cool, awesome, fun place. Everyone was happy. What if people danced? Okay, not with that shirt. We've got that.
Yeah.
We don't have the don't suck cock. We don't have most handsome troglodyte. We see. I mean, he doesn't say Truman, where are you?
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Maybe it's a half point.
You're really, I mean, look, if you wanted to score bigger points, maybe you shouldn't have gone all in on them putting a blowjob reference in this. I I also love that, like, I'm sorry, like, I don't want to, but, like, Donald Trump in, like, 1997 when they shot this had deteriorated visibly so much from when he was going to the club in 1979. Like, you could have just hired a Donald Trump impersonator. They had them even back then, like, to play, like, young Trump going into the club. It's just ridiculous. Like, old 90s... we don't need to talk about that
young
anymore.
Trump this season on CBS.
Oh, gross. I feel really bad, and we've been talking about Harvey Weinstein for 2 straight weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically 1 full point for that one. I think we
1 out of 5. Not our best show. I think listen. No. We got 2 points because you got the outside the hotel part, but they made it look like nighttime instead of daytime.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought we replaced the outside the hotel Neve Campbell with there's going to be the Neve Campbell rolling down the window and voiceover about how cute she is. Whereas what we actually got was the thing we considered and didn't go with, which is her meeting him in the club. Like honestly, right. I didn't even say this out loud, but I was thinking earlier, like, maybe like Salma Hayek saying hello friend when he pulls out the cocaine. No, there's no way they'd do that, except they totally did.
They totally did. It's a great moment. That thought also went through my head, and I'm like, no, there's no way that's going to be in there. It's not even worth mentioning. But it's worth mentioning just because Salma Hayek is queen, and that is a fantastic line she had.
Can you imagine Salma Hayek looking at you and saying hello friend? I would die.
No.
I would simply die.
I just want to be your friend. Yeah. So no,
I know that's there's not even anything. There's not even any other layers beyond that. Just the fact getting approval from Salma Hayek. She doesn't like I did something that impressed her. She thinks I'm cool.
I don't even get that from my day life.
I mean,
my nightlife though. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Oh, hello. Well, yes. When they didn't let you in that club because of your shoelaces, you went to a much more positive and affirming nightclub.
Oh, God. What does it say about us that we did better on Life or something like it than 54? Does it say anything at all about us? I don't think it says anything about us.
No, I don't think it says anything. I don't think it says... I think it's easier to guess how a movie like Life or something like it is going to be marketed than a movie like this. I mean, I think our biggest mistake was just assuming that this movie would try to engage... or this trailer would try to engage meaningfully with any of the actual stuff in the movie, as opposed to just dancing.
And putting Mike Myers at the forefront.
Well, and also the fact that they repeatedly cut to the Neve Campbell disco ball mid-credits sequence.
Yeah, the moment that shows up at the very last after the credits roll on the theatrical cut. There's just this 30-second shot of a disco ball coming down in front of Neve Campbell wearing kind of billowy goddess-looking outfit. The fact that that's in the trailer is shocking to me.
I love thinking about the reshoots when that happened, where it's like, oh, okay, Neve, we're going to have you put on this dress and just stand here, and we're going to lower a disco ball to you, and you grab it. Why am I doing that? What does that have to do? Just do it. It's almost
like she's living Shane's reality of, like, being objectified for the movie.
A woman being objectified in Hollywood? I don't know, Landon. Sounds a little far-fetched.
Especially at Miramax.
Yeah, no.
All right, so are you ready to kind of revisit and make a final verdict about whether we should send this back to modern memory and why this movie was forgotten in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it, man.
All right, well, I'll give you kind of opening salvo about rehashing, even though we talked about it a little bit last week. Now that you've seen the director's cut, now you have the full story of 54, its director's cut, its theatrical cut. Why do you think this was forgotten?
I mean, I think this was forgotten because the studio wouldn't let it be the movie it was supposed to be. They, you know, if this movie had come out, if they'd released the director's cut, people would have remembered it. I'm not saying it would have won awards. I'm not saying it would have been Best Picture. I'm not saying that college freshmen would have had posters of it up in their dorms or anything. But
I think it would have at least queued up Mike Myers for a more viable Oscar campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that just when they truly cut the heart out of this movie and gave us something that is just it's it's like just all frosting. It's all fondant. Is that how you pronounce it? It's like back when everything was cake. You remember that, folks, right? When things were cake, and
Yes.
and it's like they give you the DVD or whatever of 54, and then you try to pick it up, and it's just all frosting. Like that's what the theatrical cut was.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it was forgotten. I think that this cut of the movie should be remembered because, like, I think this tells a story that is interesting, and I think that a story that has a lot of heart to it, and I think that says a lot of really interesting things about objectification and how, you know, we value ourselves and how we find value in who we are and what we bring to a situation. And I'll even go with you on the point that you made last night, last week, that last night when we were at Studio 54 recording this, but that they should include the theatrical cut on Blu-rays of the director's cut. It should just be that the default option when you watch 54 should be this cut of the movie, and then you have to like jump through a bunch of hoops and like sign a waiver to see the original version, because it does. I think like film students should watch these movies back to back because it is a lesson about editing and how much can change.
That is so powerful here, just especially in the scenes where it's little tiny trims to shots, and you know, in the theatrical cut that they needed for the runtime, like when they're fighting, little performance things, little, you know, shots of them dancing that go on 1 or 2 seconds longer in the theatrical cut that are trimmed for time and performance. It's edited to performance here that have resounding effects. It's not just we need to make this movie shorter, we need to, you know, whatever. I'm thinking specifically when they're fighting, when Breckin Meyer comes in and sees him kissing or about to kiss Salma Hayek in the kitchen. Yeah, the fight scene in the theatrical cut, it's like they use every single inch of the reels in order to get Breckin Myers out the door. She's tearing his shirt. It's very melodramatic. In the director's cut, it's trimmed down to be just like an intense scene, and we don't get the melodramatics of like him kind of turning around to get his shirt out of her hands and then backing out the door. Like it's just it's so much more snappy and a much more effective scene because of it. I agree.
Yeah, what about you?
This I feel like this is forgotten. You said it so much more succinctly than I'm about to, but
nice.
It's a movie that was retooled for broader appeal when the story itself seems like it has niche appeal. I think that audiences interested in the kind of liberating debauchery of Studio 54, you know, the sex, drugs, and celebrity lifestyle, wouldn't care and might even expect, you know, the full breadth of sexuality, good and bad. But the audiences who aren't interested in that aren't going to see this film anyway.
No, of course.
I think it's also probably an unfortunate victim of queer-coded films getting cut to be marketed to a wider, you know, audience.
Straighter audience,
Yeah, a wider, straighter audience. And that they so that they can have, you know, like a wider critical discussion. You know, like I don't think that something like oh my God, the movie that we just talked about has escaped my brain. That I love with Christian Bale and Ewan McGregor.
Oh, Velvet Goldmine.
Velvet Goldmine. God damn. You know, I don't think that was being reviewed by Peter Travers. Maybe it was, but it, you know, wasn't like getting an Oscar push. This one, it feels like we need to open it up to getting it into the Chicago Tribune. We need this in the critics' hands who talk to the mass audiences.
This needs to be in the movie theaters in the suburbs that the youths go to.
Yeah, and because we're doing this movie on the heels of our Tarzan episode, and we made a very specific point in that episode, I just want to draw a little comparison for you here about why this movie was forgotten. Okay, it's August 28th, 1998. That's when I remember it well. It's when 54 is released, and let's just paint the scenario. You and your dad are going to the movies on that night, and you have two options. You, on the one hand, could go see 54, the movie that you want to see, and you can discuss how young people need expression, they need release, they need the variety of ways that they can find themselves, and how each of you can experience that. What is it like for him to, come of age? What is it like for you to come of age? Learn about each other from your differences and similarities.
Yeah. What is it like to watch numerous sex scenes with your dad? What is it like to? I'm also thinking about how old I was in 1998 and how much fun that would have been for me. Go on.
But I mean, that's kind of my point. There's a kind of cultural stigma around that, because the other option is you could go see that in that theater that weekend, Saving Private Ryan. And you could just sit there in stoic silence as you both reflect on like the sacrifices of the greatest generation, never actually conversing with one another. I don't know.
I don't know, man. I mean, let's not reduce Saving Private Ryan down to something that doesn't prompt conversation. I remember seeing that movie and talking about it with my parents. Like, I get the point that you're making. It's just like Saving Private Ryan, also valid, also good movie. Like, it prompts discussion and thought.
It's more what the point I'm making is, like, there's this movie that is about prompting discussion about current experience and
sure, lived experiences.
Yeah, versus a movie to make your dad proud, which Saving Private Ryan is the pinnacle of how those movies can be good. But it's definitely, I mean, Steven Spielberg even fucking said, I made this movie for my dad.
Sure. I mean, so, okay, but again, like, much like the director's cut of 54, Saving Private Ryan is about men loving men and how they express their love for men. It is a movie mainly about men relating to men.
And if you and your dad went and saw both movies on that weekend, you can compare and contrast and maybe have a deeper conversation about it.
Dad, did you notice the similarities between the movies? I thought it was quite thought-provoking.
I mean, it's obvious people went to go see Saving Private Ryan and not 54, and that's why this movie is forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying Saving Private Ryan is why 54 is forgotten, but people are more apt to, I think, take the safer route, because that's historical and that's something that like actually happened, versus like the kind of uncomfortable nature of, well, why do you want to talk about this movie? You want to go, I feel like America kind of has the perspective, let me rephrase that, this movie's being marketed to people that Miramax thinks have the mentality of the dad in this movie.
Sure, of course. Well, and this version of the movie was cut based on the reactions of an audience full of the dad from this movie watching the director's cut and being like, gross. Yeah, so on the one hand, Miramax made a reasonable decision based on the reaction of their test screening. On the other hand, Miramax made a ridiculous decision by assuming that one group of like 60 people in Long Island were representative of all film goers in America. So
well, and I still, following our conversation with Lewis, I still think that there wasn't some destined, setting it up to fail in that way. I mean, focus groups weren't a new thing by then, so like you're choosing your audience who you're going to show it to. I think you're looking for a predetermined outcome there.
Yeah,
maybe I don't know. Again, you're looking for you're looking for a villain, but okay. So I guess my verdict is, I'm always long-winded in these things. I'm so sorry. You just want to end the episode. We all just want to end the episode.
It's podcasting. We all just want listen. I hope all of you have just a little bit more laundry to fold while we wrap this one up. I hope your bus stop is like 3 stops away.
I've only got 3 more minutes here, which is not even. Just acknowledging that the definitive Studio 54 film has yet to be made. I have an unequivocal vote to send this back to modern memory. Just from a personal level, as I said, I've never had an experience flip-flopping in a positive way on a movie in such a drastic time frame. But as I said last week, we got to send back the whole mess. We got to send back the theatrical cut. We got to send back the director's cut. We got to send back Lewis's article that gives context between the two. I know, because it's just, as you said, it's just an excellent film school. And I think it has some really interesting performances.
Yeah.
And it's just a great vibe. We talked a little bit last week of like, I would put this movie on as just a party vibe.
Yes, yeah. I even with the director's cut, I would do that. I would just be more conflicted about it because the director's cut, A, is sadder, and B, I would be like, guys, listen, this is the scene where Mike Myers says, "Where would I go?"
That's in both cuts.
Oh yeah, this is true. That is in both cuts. I would also feel weird, like, having that on at a party, everyone's having a good time, then you glance at the TV, it's like, oh, it's Mike Myers vomiting on a pile of money. Okay, well. Anyway, it's been a great birthday, Truman. Thanks a lot.
Oh, God.
At your birthday party, do you want, like, a little, like, an angel to dangle down from the ceiling and hand you a Blu-ray of Studio 54, or 54, the director's cut?
I already own it because I bought it for this episode. But I would take another one because I would give it out as a gift to somebody.
Oh, so you'd re-gift it? Wow. Don't tell Steve Rubell that. He's going to be very upset. See if you get into 54 next year.
I in sending this back to Modern Memory, I want to give it to more people. I want a wider range of eyes on this movie. So, yeah, I don't feel bad about regifting something I already own.
Oh, okay. So I guess basically it's that everyone in Modern Memory is Truman Capote. We together are the cherub angel getting dangled down, handing the director's cut of 54 to them.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
That makes perfect sense. Another brick in the wall of our indecipherable lingo, and I think we're good. I think we did it.
All right, well, I am happy and a little sad to be putting 54 to bed, but I think there's only one thing left to do, and that's to see where the machine is sending us next.
Okay, looks like we're heading for August 8th, 2006.
Oh, okay, and looks like we're gonna need our knee-highs and pitchforks, because we're gonna be scooping up some cow shit.
Look, again, if I look back at what I was up to in 2006, I was wearing some cargo shorts, so I don't need knee-highs. My ankles are just gonna be fully splattered in poo.
I'm also not convinced that they're called knee-highs. They're just those tall boots that go up to your knee.
I mean, yeah, I think they're just called boots, man. Unless maybe the lingo was different in 2006. It's been so long, I can hardly remember.
I've never been on a farm before, so this is going to be an interesting experience for both of us.
I mean, look, we may like it. We may go country and never come back. We're gonna be like Beyonce, basically.
I have worn a cowboy hat before, and am very tempted to get one in real life.
If a cow is good enough to get led into Studio 54, then surely it's good enough for us to learn about in our next movie.
All right, well, for Truman Caps, I have been Landen Solano.
And for Landen Solano, I've been Truman Caps.
We'll see you next week, folks.
Whoa!
Movie Memory Machine is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/gruntworkpodcast to keep the machine running. Theme song by Porky's Groove Machine. Rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. For more information on today's show, visit MovieMemoryMachine.com.